Hello, everybody, and welcome to High Tales of History. We're back. We're back, baby. It's a show where two sisters go on a hazy quest through history and surprise the other with a story from the past. I'm Laurel. I'm the elder sister.
Joined by Katie, the younger sister.
Lightning strikes.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, flashes. Anyway, we're delighted to have you in the smoke circle. So welcome in with us as we take that said hazy journey into the first episode of season 5. We are also delighted, so delighted to have one of our very bestest best friends finally on the show with us. Literally, as we record this, I don't want to bring up the math, but as this goes out into the world, we're marking our 20-year friendship. Pretty much, like almost to the week, just about. We're pretty close. Yeah. And Matt was very nearly the third host of High Tales of History. So it's a little known fun fact for all you longtime listeners. We made a little pilot episode together and everything. Like, yeah, so he would have been like our brother from another mother, sort of. Like, yeah. He'd have been like the sibling that would just, the adopted sibling.
Not from the same sack, but I'll always have your back, dog.
So it's about time that we have him on, folks. The one, the only, our Matty Baker. Welcome, bestie.
Thanks for having me.
Will he be located here when we're on YouTube? Oh, okay. I'll just start pointing.
We can point to any direction. By the time this video downloads. Yeah. Just look up at a square, because whenever we download the content that we're recording, a lot of times the squares get switched or they move to different areas, and then me and Katie will be pointing to each other like, yeah, like
not the right way.
And we're like, pointing in different directions. It's the whole thing. You know what?
These idiots are stoners.
We're just pointing. I don't know what's going on. Oh my goodness. We would also like to welcome all of our new listeners within the past couple of months. We've had a lovely little uptick in new followers and subscribers to the show, which is so fun on our various platforms that our show goes out to. And then we've also had a couple of new patrons, a couple of new people joining the Best Buds Club, which is great. And a new patron at the top tier. His name is Drew. So welcome to the Best Buds Club, Drew. Oh my gosh. It's so exciting when people that you don't know personally end up becoming patrons, which is so wonderful. Got that little email on Christmas Eve. It was a lovely little Christmas present of a new person joining the club. So welcome, Drew. And if you're wondering, hey, wait a second, how do I get a shout out in the show? How do I get a sticker and a handwritten note from my favorite history loving stoner sisters from the Midwest? It's a very niche. We don't want to take anybody else's spot, so that's our specific spot. How do I get to watch historical movies with you on the big brown couch and hang out with you in between the episodes? And for that, my friend, I'd say you head on over to patreon.com/High Tales of History. And you can join the Rollers Left Club, which is currently our top tier. It's where Drew joined. And Matt's also one of our Rollers Left best buds, too. Shucks, guys, appreciate it. And you too can be on the Rollers Left or just a Best Bud for the price of like a latte a month, and you'll get bonus episodes. Yeah, right. Well, you put it into perspective. It's like a fancy coffee a month. That's great. You'll get bonus episodes. So our mini episodes, we just had a new one come out about Harriet Tubman. Early access to the episodes. When we get merch rolled out and all that fun stuff, you'll have discounts on that. So yeah, go on over there. It's all linked in our show notes. All right. Hail down the gangs. All here, down in the show notes. Or is it up? Or is it left? Is it right? It's like Dr.
No. Show notes are down below. That one I know where it is. Don't try to trick me.
Oh, it's so wonderful to be back, Katie. It's great to be back and then like all electronically hang out together again. How are we? I know the answer, but I gotta ask. How are we doing? And what are we partaking in while we talk protest tonight?
Well, in protest, I decided to get a Canadian whiskey, Pendleton, which is delightful. And if I run out of that, then I have some Chilean Cabernet.
That's what I'm talking about.
It's
beautiful.
Oh, I miss wine.
If I start to slur throughout the episode, blame them, not.
Welcome to High
and
Tales
they're
of History is
delicious.
what I like to say. Oh, that's good. I know. I wish I had some wine. I just actually recently ran out of my
I miss
glassy box of
wine.
wine. So sorry, Katie.
Dude, it's been like a year. Oh no, not till April. So like 2 months away, and it's been like a year since I've had booze. So like, not. I mean, it's always good to take a break, but not necessarily by like choice. In case anyone was wondering, it's medical. Can't have it at the moment. So one day that sweet, succulent taste of 8 years in the desert will pass these lips again. So let me tell you what.
That wine, it comes back up again. I know. I have to. I should write that down. I said it last time you talked about it. I was like,
I
oh,
think
I'll
it's
write
in the
that down.
cabinet behind me. Do you want to see what it looks like? Hold on. There it is. 8 years in the desert. What?
Wow.
What?
Nice.
So in case you all want, it's oh, I'm sorry. I should probably tell you what it is. Red.
Solid start. Yep.
Red. I think it's a cab.
Does
It
it
just
say?
says California red wine, so you got me. But I'm pretty sure it
Oh.
is a cab. It's delicious. That's all you need to know. It's leggy.
It's wine.
Like, what y'all, leggy? Oh, wait, hold on. Did you know I have like zombie unicorn socks on? Oh,
Girl,
Cool.
save your feet for the Patreon.
oh, sorry.
That's where we get the tips.
free feet in this economy.
See, it's like a zombie unicorn. Check
Oh,
that
that's
out.
awesome.
Isn't
That
that
is
proud of
really
great?
you.
good, actually.
That's really cool.
Thanks.
Nice.
I'm sorry. I'm partaking in an edible this evening, which, believe it or not, has not hit yet. And when it does,
Are
you're
you
gonna
sure?
know. Yeah,
Are
I
you
am
sure?
sure. Because I
Okay.
literally just took it before I sat down. I don't think it happens that fast, girl.
Oh, okay. Well, I smoked a pre-roll that was on sale at the dispensary. I went in to get rolling papers, and I was like, well, I've got a few extra bucks. I'll get the pre-roll that's on sale. It's a garlic cocktail number 7 from Galaxy Labs. And
Garlic cocktail.
right? I mean, what a name.
Right?
Garlic
I was
cocktail
like,
7.
oh.
And you're like,
Yeah.
that's the one.
That's the one for me. Fuck off, Dracula. Folks, our Matty Baker is not only our dear friend, but he is a talented musician and songwriter. And so I just thought, you know what? It's time to talk about the history of protest music in America. You know what I'm saying? Look into the camera. Knowing look.
Agreed.
And so who better to have you talking about American music than your musician friends, right? So we're going to take a little trip through protest music and songs in America. We're going to start from America's pre-revolutionary days, and we're going to go all the way up to the country's most recent years and what protest music is looking like today. Maybe even the kind of the future of it. We've got the Super Bowl coming up this weekend. We're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to go from Yankee Doodle to Kendrick Lamar. American protest music in general, really, but even protest music is such a deep well. Like, we're talking a deep well. And so what we're doing is we're just
Couldn't
going to
even
kind
hear
of,
you shout at the other end of it. I was like, hello?
it just goes. There's no echo that comes back. So what we're going to do for this episode is we're just going to take a little bucket out of that deep well, and just know that we won't be covering every protest song, of course. And there's going to be a lot of even some certain years that we're leaving out as well too. And you might have some picks that you're like, hell yeah, I agree with that. Or you're like, no, I don't agree with that one. I have a different pick. And in which case, please leave us a comment telling us the songs that you would have included. So if you're watching on YouTube, go down the comments. Let us know, like, what would you have included? What did you love? You can also do this on Spotify too. If you're listening, you can leave comments. And it's bound to happen, right? Because we're just trying to pick a little sample. But we want to give you the broad strokes of what the musical shake of the fist to the man, capital T, capital M, has looked like through American history. To also accompany you on your journey tonight through musical history, we have included a YouTube playlist. So I have that linked in the show notes down there. Or if you're on YouTube, you can just find it under our playlist. It's going to have all the songs that we talk about tonight in order. And then also a few honorable mentions in there that I just songs I really loved, but I couldn't talk about tonight. Or if Katie or Matt have any to add to that, we'll throw those in as well too. So spark up, pour yourself a drink or a cozy cup of tea, and we are going to talk protest. So we are going to start before America was America as we know it. You know, it was before it was an independent country. That's right, folks. Protest music didn't start at the Declaration of Independence. We are going to go back to one of the first world wars. Hey, wait a second, Laurel, you stone so-and-so. That doesn't make any historical timeline sense. First World War didn't occur before America existed. What are you talking about? So this is real. I may have baited you a little bit there. Sorry about that. But there is a case to be made for the 7 Years' War being the First World War in terms of the scope of it. So the 7 Years' War was a war that involved quite a few countries, but it was namely France versus Great Britain and then each of their allies. So there's a lot of countries that were involved, but like the main two.
A lot of posses showed up to that roll call. They were like ready. Like we all showed up in the fucking schoolyard for that one. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like,
you mess with my bro, like I'm also here too. And it's also worth noting that the countries that were involved, particularly again France and Great Britain, were colonizing countries because that is part of the whole scope of this war. And it was actually also fought on a few different continents. So it might not be the World War, quote unquote, in the sense of the scale of it, like World War I or World War II, or even like that many countries involved in comparison. But it was a world war in terms of the scale because those superpowers at the time, again, like I said, those colonizing countries had colonial interests all over the world.
Actually, a really fair point. Never thought of it. Like when you said that, I was like, dude, I actually totally agree with you.
So when you think,
I mean, I know I'm stoned right now, but I still have enough brain left to sit here and be like, that checks out. Because when you said it, I was like, yeah, but they have colonies like all the way down in South America. And then I think Australia was still probably a colony at this point.
Yep.
And like all of that. So I mean, it's literally the entire world at some point was involved.
Certainly to protect the interests, right? And North America was like the big one that Great Britain and France were like really no. Britain had her 13 colonies there, and then France also had colonies and people there too. So when the 7 Years' War lands on the shores of North America, the American history books like to call this portion of it the French and Indian Wars. So in case you're like, I know the French and Indian Wars, I've heard the 7 Years' War. It's the same thing. It's just like part of a larger picture. So how about that?
Okay.
And it's this time period, French and Indian Wars, that we get Yankee Doodle. This is like nursery rhyme stuff. This is one that like all the Americans know, although historically speaking, the words have been changed over time. So like we would know it now. I think it's like, Yankee Doodle went to town riding on his pony, stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni, right? Yeah. So that's a new verse that has been added from the original. Still very old, but wasn't even the original. So like the words have really evolved and changed over time.
We're on remix number 20 at this point.
For real. And we're going to actually see that so many times tonight in all these songs. The tune itself is already well known, but it's said that in 1755, a British doctor by the name of Richard Shuckburgh wrote new words to the tune to make fun of American colonists. It portrayed them as crude, cowardly, like country hicks, like, and you are arrogant, conceited jerks. That is like the dandy part of it. So doodle is like kind of like country bumpkin.
Yeah.
And then like the dandy part, like, and then you, on top of that, you're a conceited jerk. You think you're better than you are. So it's not nice to the colonists. And after the 7 Years' War, when things were coming to a revolutionary head between England and its colonies, British troops continued to use Yankee Doodle in order to mock the colonists. According to the lore that surrounds Yankee Doodle, because there's a few different little stories, but the main one is that after the first shots were taken at Lexington, you know, like the shot heard around the world, that whole thing, that whole chestnut, the first shots of the Revolutionary War taken at Lexington, British forces killed 8 colonists. They then marched on to Concord, and during their march, colonial militiamen were like, we gotta cut them off at the pass, like, right? We gotta catch up with them. They had dotted themselves along the way, along the path of the British forces, and then were like picking them off as they were walking along. And it's said that during the counterattack, now I'm not sure who's going to be able to hear this, but this is, again, the lore that surrounds Yankee Doodle. But it's said that during the counterattack and then the subsequent British retreat, that the colonists sang Yankee Doodle real fucking loud, and that it might have also been played at the British surrender at Yorktown, which is what ended the Revolutionary War. So it's this theme that we're going to see throughout the episode, as I just mentioned. Like, a song will get used for one message, and then certain groups of people, or for a certain purpose, and then like we'll get it reused, new lyrics added for another group, changes the meaning, but still the same song. Because
what that like immediately made me think of, and I feel like everybody who's read this is going to know exactly what I'm talking about, is remember in Harry Potter when they did that Weasley is our king song? And it was like all made to make fun of him, and then it like switches to the other way. They use it like as a victory song after that, and I was like, that was the first thing I thought of. I was like, totally, dude. I had no idea Yankee Doodle was one such diddle. But it is.
A diddle indeed. A doodle, a diddle, and play it on your fiddle. Because that's what makes it easy, right? Like, if you have a tune that everybody knows, you can just learn new lyrics to it. It makes it easier to learn. So speaking of pre-Revolutionary War songs that take its tune from an enemy song, it's also worth putting forth the Liberty Song by John Dickinson, which was one of the earliest patriotic songs. And also, there you go, another fun fact, see if this helps you win any pub trivia, but it's also one of the earliest known publications of the phrase, "United we stand, divided we fall." In the song, it's actually by uniting we stand, by dividing we fall, but it's the same
Same
sort of
shit.
thing, right?
Just extra words.
And the Liberty Song was set to the tune of Heart of Oak, which was the anthem of Britain's Royal Navy. So it says, come cheer up, my lads, 'tis to glory we steer, to add something more to this wonderful year. To honor we call you as free men, not slaves, for who are we so free as the son of the waves? Chorus is, Heart of Oak are our ships, heart of oak are our men. We always are ready, steady boys, steady. We'll fight and we'll conquer again and again. Oh, heave ho, up the sails. We just love being part of the Royal Navy. Not just kidding. So it's a song sung by unfree sailors. And it was designed, I don't know, I mean, that first line there, it just feels like the most like, for who are we so free as the son of the waves? Like, don't you just feel so good just being out on the ocean, the sea breeze in your hair and the, wind on your, I don't know, whatever, on your face. Don't you just love this? Life in the Royal Navy was notoriously bad. And a lot of the sailors in the Navy were impressed, which is to say, like, they were forced into service. So the Liberty Song, give you just a couple examples of the lyrics, is, come join hand in hand, brave Americans all, and rouse your bold hearts at fair liberty's call. No tyrannous acts shall suppress your just claim, or stain with dishonor America's name. And then another verse is, how sweet are the labors that free men endure, that men shall enjoy the sweet profit secure. No more sweet labors Americans know, if British shall reap what Americans sow. Yankee Doodle and the Liberty Song were the anthems of the American Revolution. And there were some other songs that came out in revolutionary years, pre, during, and post. But I chose those two songs as like they're early examples. And they're not only songs that like shake their fist at a monarchy that some believe that, were taking advantage of the colonies and the colonists, not representing them and taxing them unfairly, making the colonies foot the bill for that French and Indian war, that 7 Years War that ended up in their backyard.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, they're like, what the fuck? But the songs also seem to shape, and this is just my interpretation of this, but they seem to shape the identity of what it means to be American. So with Yankee Doodle, it's sort of like this, oh yeah, you think we're uneducated and crass and arrogant? Like you might have a point there, but like, how do you like these Yankee Doodles? They just kicked your ass, kind of thing. And it's like this, like, right? I've never faked grabbed myself on camera before, and there we are, everybody.
The first time for everything.
Yeah, I'm still inches away, but still, it's hard.
It still felt wrong.
It felt really weird afterwards. Sorry about that. And the Liberty Song being one of liberty, right? It's like that classic American patriotic song, freedom, liberty. It talks about their forefathers coming over and then like in that last verse, they're like feeling like they're toiling for a monarchy they're just taking from us, the colonists. So just a classic American patriotic song.
That's a really
America itself,
interesting
yeah.
thing. Any kind of like culture aspect where you feel some kind of threatening aspect, something, and then we find
Mm,
comfort in it because we're used to enduring it. So, as a means of psychologically being able to accept this thing over time, we find a way to relate comfort with it, therefore adopting the tune of the song, but then making it our own, you know? And I
hmm.
think that's kind of seen throughout most of the songs that we're going to cover today. That
Yeah.
there's a familiar tune, and then we end up adopting a different ideology of the tune with our own lyrics to it, but still it harkens back to that original suffering that we had to
Hmm.
feel, or that somebody had to feel. And we just found a way to bring comfort to ourselves through it because we knew it oppressed us to begin with. So we just kind of found a way to exercise that demon through our own song, which is really cool. And I think that's
Yeah,
like a focal point with Americans, with humanity, anybody, that
That
you
was
know that
profound
you
as
have to
fuck.
suffer, but you have to like find a way to get through it. So you adopt this different ideology of that. And that's
hmm,
a power of music, you know?
absolutely. Yeah, and in
Yeah.
the using of that is a protest in of itself. Like the words can be
Yeah,
protesting, but then like
right.
Hmm.
using quote unquote, like an opposition song, like whoever your opposition might be or who you're fighting against,
Right.
using their song. Okay, it's our song now. It's that
Yeah.
reclamation of
Right.
identity with it. That's a really
Yes,
amazing point to make.
absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
And that comes in with like language, even, you know, like we use specific terminology to talk about certain people. Sometimes certain people will take that terminology and then adapt it to their own verbiage with each other, if you know what
Hmm.
I'm alluding to. And then
Yeah.
it becomes something that's not so abusive. It becomes
Yeah. It's
something.
Hmm.
kind of like a reclamation.
There's a
Yeah.
power in words, but when you transfer that power into something powerful, it doesn't
Hmm.
have the same effect. And it also
Hmm.
like kind of stings the person that's originally trying to persecute you. And
Hmm.
there's a beauty in that.
That's an excellent point to make because you're right. This is going to happen not just in pre-revolutionary songs where like it makes sense to use a song that everyone knows because it's not like today where you can just pull up YouTube or Spotify or something and be like, oh, I
Yeah.
can hear that song now, right?
Right.
Or TikTok, like any new music that way. It's like, okay, we all know this song, great, excellent. These are the new words to it, and it's cool to see that happening again, like throughout history, regardless of the timeline and like the technology that we have access to learn new things. Because yeah, I mean, America itself was born out of protest and revolution. The
Yeah.
Declaration of Independence even gives reasoning as to why revolution is sometimes necessary in order to secure these quote unquote self-evident truths and rights.
Yeah.
So I just pulled up a little bit of the Declaration of Independence here, just because sometimes I think we kind of it'd be good. It's good to hear it. It's good to hear it,
Mm-hmm.
folks. Just so we know. Plus, we need to make sure that we're
Reading it.
reading it, perpetuating
Following
it.
through
Just
with it.
found out today that
Mm-hmm.
Secretary of State is the secret, not so secret, national archivist. We haven't had the Secretary of State be a national archivist since 1949. National
Mm-hmm.
archivist, in this case, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, is in charge of basically it's preserving American history, also certifying new amendments, and literally being in charge of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Like those very important pieces of paper are in the hands of the National Archivist. So here is a little blip from said Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Consent of the governed. I'm going to repeat that again for the people in the back. that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
Wait,
So that's just
Safety and
safety
happy.
and happiness.
Cool.
They actually put in the Declaration of Independence of like, hey, if your government is not representing the people, if it is not, well, not even just representing the people, but is oppressing the people, if it is not serving those unalienable rights for its people, the people, they govern by the consent of the governed. So the governed have that right to speak up. So protest is what I'm saying here. Now, as I mentioned, there were a handful of pre and post revolution songs that were part of Young America. And I think all these songs, while often being used against another government, they became the basis for like future protest songs, which we were getting on a little bit ago. Because yes, protest music has always evolved. And yes, like new lyrics were applied to like the greatest hits of the era, melodies and tunes like everyone knew. But the meaning changed and evolved as America grew up. So there's more to that. So we're taking a song like Heart of Oak, the subject of which was something Americans really wanted to protest against. And then like they changed it, right? As Matt mentioned, that's a really powerful message that gets sent, that reclamation. Like even just the act of transforming the song, regardless of the words, is like its own type of protest too. And so that went double when the people rewriting the song came from a suppressed group. So like a frequent topic of protest in the United States is the concept of freedom, liberty. Like what does freedom mean? Like, what does it look like? What does it look like in America? Who is freedom for? Is it for everyone? Who gets to decide then if one group of people is free or not? In a country with millions of enslaved people, those questions really struck deep, right? Like if someone's hearing the Declaration of Independence, like that we are all, in the eyes of our Creator, created equal, and we are all endowed with these unalienable rights. That includes me too, right? Like that's the question, right? Like, okay, why you and not me if I'm a human being too? And that's why we'll see, for example, like the abolitionist movement taking really popular and well-known melodies and then adding lyrics that really interrogated that notion of freedom on a much different level. So it's like, okay, you're talking about freedom. Cool. I'm super interested in freedom. So let's talk about it. Let's really talk about freedom.
We're going to head down south, and where the very question of freedom is at the forefront of our minds. So Laurel, I'm going to be honest, she assigned me things. I just had to complete an assignment this week.
Yeah.
So my assignment was the antebellum South.
It's real big sister shit right there. Like,
right?
This is what you're doing. Let me just tell you right now, that's what you're doing. Like, okay. Sorry.
I mean, I didn't take it like that. I was like, this is my moment to shine.
Yeah.
Which takes us to the antebellum South, everybody. So what is that? What does it mean? Antebellum, if you kind of pull them apart into two words themselves, means before the war. And this refers to the period from the war. I wrote way. I can't type. The War of 1812 to the start of the Civil War. This was a time when the South's economy, it relied heavily on cheap slave labor, which is free, when it came to the farming and export of tobacco, cotton, and rice. The rice, actually, I was not taught in school. I just want to point that out.
Yeah, that's an interesting addition.
Yeah, that was like new information to me, right? I'm glad you said that, because I also sat there, and it like actually took me aback so much that when I was typing, I like asked Blake, I was like, do you remember rice being a part of like everything you learned about like the Civil War in the South? And he's like, no, I don't remember that at all. I remember cotton, obviously, and tobacco. Rice was massive. So
that's amazing. Okay. Thank you for, this is what we do. We learn. We're all learning together.
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't the only one, like, who, like, I just thought, like, maybe I didn't catch it, and then I asked a couple other people, and they're like, yeah, no, actually, that's a new one for me. It wasn't in my textbook, and I was like, mine either. Okay, that's good. So, which brings us to music down in the South. Music and what it means to people living in captivity. how important is music to them? What kinds of music do they have? It probably comes as no surprise that it's extremely important. Yes, it raises morale, but it's also extremely important as far as even like preserving their culture.
Mm-hmm.
So when people were taken, a lot of times like a neighboring tribe or a group of colonists would come and take you. Obviously, this was forceful taking. And you didn't have time to like pack your shit. So you were taken in whatever you were wearing. And a lot of times I think they even stripped you down and put you in something else, and you were chained on a boat and you hoped that you made it.
Mm.
So again, there's no time to like pack family photos and stuff away in your stuff. So when you arrive there, you arrive with nothing. You don't speak English or whatever is being, or French or whatever is being spoken to you when you arrive. And you know, they're going to expect that you learn that. So you can't speak your own language, which is kind of an important thing as well as far as preserving culture and all that. So, you know, they're kind of left with what? And that's kind of anything culturally they could take with them, which would include music or a musical style or anything like that, you know, that they would take from the homelands, even if maybe not everybody remembered a song or whatnot, they could still pass down the manner in which that music would have occurred. That was kind of a big like moment for me. I know this is going to sound really silly, but like again, another moment where I stopped and like looked at Blake. I was like, it's kind of one of the most humanizing moments of like the Deep South for me was like, wow, that's all you could take with you was music, and like how much bigger music got as far as like what it means to the Black community. Like that's the one thing that truly connects them to their roots. And I was like, it was a very not to use the word profound again, but it was a very profound moment for me. I was like, whoa, that's fucking wild. Music is a form of expression and a place that viewed people more as animals versus like an actual person with emotions. So like emotion is not a luxury they were afforded in captivity. That's where I'm going with that very awkwardly worded sentence. The only way you got to express that human side of yourself that we all have is through music. So it's not just like a means to preserving who you are, where you came from, who you're related to, whatnot, but like also the way you could grieve or celebrate or like anything like that. I was having a really profound time with this, you guys. Like this time, I was like, this shit is deep.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, as you should. I mean, that's a huge thing. Can you imagine that? Like being transposed from one place to another, and you
I
literally have
know.
nothing with you.
Yeah.
All you can do is just sing and create some kind of art out of your sorrow, your suffering.
Yeah.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
fuck. Like, that's everything. All of
Yeah.
your personality comes out in music.
Yes, obviously, like I said, a means of expressing emotion and means of preserving your culture. It was also a form of communication. They used it to coordinate work tasks, like that they would keep pace with the task with it, things like that. You know, everybody stays in order of whatever task is being done, as well as it built a sense of community amongst all of them, despite kind of the harsh reality of living in captivity. And it really became an ingrained and deep, critical part of their daily life and activities. You know, from like the time you get up in the morning, you know, probably mom would walk around waking everybody up, getting breakfast ready. There's probably song being sung to that, you know. And then, you know, when you're out in the field working, you'd be singing there. Or when you're walking there, maybe you'd be singing, or you'd probably sing over making dinner, anything like that. I mean, humans have song for everything, right? After we had went to see Blake and I Vordruna in Red Rocks in Colorado, and he gives this whole speech at the end that he said, you know, we as humans back to like the dawn of our times, we had song for everything, for celebrating, eating, washing, or death, and like for every aspect of our life had song to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of like connected that with this again, that like real deep connection to your roots with that, and not just their roots as Africans transposed into America, but also our roots as people. Back to the most deepest core of our roots, we have song.
Well,
Mhm.
like you were talking about, like when you're like on your journey to whatever area you're going to be doing the work day, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you have your steps. Your steps is the rhythm, and the
Yeah.
rhythm is going to like taking you to your destination. You maybe aren't so pleased to be there, but you still
Yeah.
have to do it. So like a song was created to help you get to that point, bring some kind of levity.
A lot of songs were
Music is a
sad
barbecue
though.
of life.
You know,
Well,
a
yeah.
lot of the songs were sad, were full of sorrow, and I don't know. Frederick Douglass talks a lot about that on a piece of paper somewhere. I wrote it down,
That'd
but
be too
I
easy.
thought it was really interesting. Yeah. But this is Editing Laurel coming in from the future. I found that section that I was talking about. It's from Frederick Douglass's Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, Chapter 2, one of his books. Quote, I have often been utterly astonished since I came to the North to find persons who could speak of the singing among slaves as evidence of their contentment and happiness. It is impossible to conceive of a greater mistake. Slaves sing most when they are most unhappy. The songs of the slave represent the sorrows of his heart, and he is relieved by them only as an aching heart is relieved by its tears.
And why would, like if
Mm-hmm.
if
Right.
there
Yeah.
was a reason to sing a happy song, then they would. But like,
Mm-hmm.
But they don't see happy songs. They don't see happy times, like,
right.
yeah, man, that's like grieving. It's like a healthy form of
Yeah,
grieving, I'd like to think,
absolutely.
in my
Mhm.
opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for many people, like I said a little bit earlier, but I'm just going to kind of rehash it a little bit now, the only thing they got to bring from their homeland was their musical traditions. This includes the call and response pattern, kind of where you like go back and forth. You see it at sporting events a lot. Rhythmic drum beats. Yep, you can say that all again, Katie. Rhythmic drum beats and improvisation, which as soon, of course, as I heard that, I was like, oh, that's got to be like the precursor to rap.
And jazz too. Like
Yes, and jazz,
Mhm.
blues.
Blues,
Well,
yeah.
blues and jazz and all that were immediately like right after all this stuff, right? So very soon. That's very close. There were work songs that they used to regulate the pace of the tasks. I know I mentioned that earlier. They said they had, they called them field hollers, is what they call them, to maintain productivity, which I guess was the name for the songs
Mhm.
that they kept pace to work with. And most people are probably familiar with are the spirituals,
Yeah.
which were used to express religious faith, of course, but also the longing for freedom, and sometimes they incorporated coded messages about escape, which is really cool. You know what I found out recently is that they would do different braids to say different things to people. Like they would put maps and
Mhm.
stuff in their braids, and I was like, that is
Genius.
such a good fucking idea. I was like, that is so
Mhm.
smart. Man. I love a good plan.
Mm-hmm.
Love it when a plan comes together.
And with spirituals, and then having like a spiritual theme to it, and mentions of heaven and God and deliverance, like white enslavers were like, "Oh, isn't that great? They're so godly and singing songs of praise to the Almighty." When really that like there's even code in that too of like heaven and the promised land, deliverance, that being getting north of that Mason-Dixon line and into northern states, or even better yet, getting up to Canada. That was there was also a code in there as well too. And so I love that there's even protest in that, like, hey, you think that's what we're singing about? It's really this. Take that.
Yeah.
Love it.
So some songs that were probably most people will recognize evolved from this time period are Roll Jordan Roll, Michael Row, the boat ashore,
Mm-hmm.
Swing Low, Sweet Chariot.
Oh,
A lot of us know that one. Deep Down in My Heart, Jesus Leads Me All the Way. That's one that I think I've heard at I've heard that in like church even.
Mm-hmm.
Go Down Moses.
Yeah.
Steal Away. Bosom of Abraham. You can do this, Katie. The Bosom of Abraham. I guess that was a big one that a lot of people knew.
Okay.
Down to the River to Pray. I knew that one. Nobody Knows the Troubles I've Had. and that's where Amazing Grace comes up.
Yeah, and then when you move forward into the Civil War, like plantation songs were protest in and of themselves, but you have a literal civil war of North v South. There's like protest in the sense of like it's patriotic on both sides. Like this is our song that's going to rouse our people. And this is our song that's going to rouse our people. I bet a lot of people have heard the Battle Hymn of the Republic, but that one has a lot of different versions that capture decades of protest. So it's far from being just a patriotic song. So that was really heavily used by the Union side. The different versions of it tell the story of protest all the way through from like mid to late 19th century, before the war, the antebellum era, with the story of John Brown. So John Brown is an abolitionist, one of the biggest badasses you'll ever see in American history. He led, unfortunately, a disastrous raid on Harper's Ferry, which is like a precursor, really. It kind of predicted the outbreak of the Civil War based on what happened. During the war, a song about John Brown then evolved into the battle hymn that we all know or are very familiar with, which was underlying the righteous cause that was the total abolition of slavery.
We face the scorn of creatures who call their movement sin. Some who did oppose their path, their friends, and some were kin. And once the ties would bind them, I determined they will win. They kept marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. And the cause goes marching on.
Bravo.
Dude, I was so worried I wasn't going to recognize it. And then it's just, I was like, oh, fuck yeah, I know this one. It's a banger.
Yes.
Like, yeah. And I started like, I started like pumping it. And I was like,
Dude,
girl, hold still.
That shit slaps.
Uh-huh.
Katie,
And
don't rock the microphone.
and it did slap. It rocked so hard, it slapped so hard. Everyone and people knew it, right? So that, yeah, you bet you recognize the tune there. That particular version was adopted by the suffragists in the early 20th century as they're working to affirm women's right to vote. So they adopted it. Those were their lyrics. Before that, it was about John Brown. John Brown's body lies a moldering in the grave. And it tells a story about that. He captured Harper's Ferry with his 19 men, so few. And then it changed to the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord, right? We know that one. And so in the late 19th and 20th centuries, these were a huge period of change in America. There was, it's post-Civil War, right? So it's a reconstruction. There's also massive industrialization and urbanization. And with that came large social changes. Moving into 1918, 1919, you have the end of the First World War. Holy fuck. And then we have the passing of the 19th Amendment, which affirmed women's right to vote. And even then, there was a lot of racial discrimination policies in place to bar Black women from voting. So World War One, what a fucking doozy that was. And that's even an understatement. The world was reeling from the aftermath of the horrors of World War One and mechanized warfare. Veterans were returning what they called at the time shell-shocked, which we now would recognize as like PTSD or traumatic brain injuries. And they were also, chemical warfare's new, so they're also disfigured by gas or in like the machines of war. Although the Civil War was about 50 years earlier, Jim Crow laws, which enforced racial segregation and the oppression of American citizens, Black American citizens, they were just a way of life across the American South. And then 1915, and then all through the 20s, the growth of the bastards, the KKK, they're back again. They're having their second reiteration after after the Civil War. And all the while, simmering in the background, music has been evolving and growing. And there are two naturally protesty genres that hit the scene. And that's blues and jazz, which we were talking about a little while ago. So those spirituals, yeah, that Katie was talking about, blues, though its origin story is a little hazy, like we all are around here. And it's not so well documented. It certainly was born from the spirituals of the plantation. So not quite so hymnal, right? It wasn't like Amazing Grace, for example. But blues songs changed the focus of the hardship from we as a community to I. And even the topics themselves were of commonly shared experience, particularly for African Americans. Although one could even frequently apply it to class disparity. So some examples about the hardships that were experienced by those in the Great Migration, so going from the South to the North after the Civil War, or about like working conditions in the mines. That was a very popular topic. Poverty, police brutality. In 1917, so this is very shortly before the end of World War I, it's generally agreed upon in the music world that jazz makes its debut with the first jazz recording in February 1917. We have an episode in which we really dig into jazz music and its association with cannabis and cannabis prohibition. It's episode 58, I believe. Let me double check that. Yes, episode 58. Oh, I even wrote it down. Son of a bitch. Fucking hell. So that's an episode 58. I had to go all the way to the end, and I was like, I know, Laurel just kept, if you kept reading, you would have seen episode 58. So if you want more about jazz, you'll love that one. We're going to keep it brief for this episode, which we're going to have to do it for a lot of different genres and topics. But just know, jazz music is Black music, and that became accessible to and was even began to be loved by white audiences. So that allowed the sort of crossover that began to happen with its different audiences. There are changes in the sound of music itself, such as those new genres and their new accessibility. But the 1920s brought electrical means of music. So there's a radio boom. So radio is a thing that's happening. You can listen to the radio and listen to your favorite announcers singing stories about the shadow and stuff. I don't know. I couldn't think of anything. I panicked, and I'm pretty sure I'm not even in the same
that was
time
a really
period.
good like radio
That was
voice
really
though.
good. Really
I think it has to be the
I'm so proud.
1930s, you know. But the 20s, I might have been a bit ahead of my decades there. But the through the 20s, there was this huge radio boom all the way through the 40s, and there's also a changeover from like the crank up phonograph, like the big like trumpet thing on the crank it up, to early style record players. So music's changing, and that means the protest music changes too. So through the earliest 20th century, protest songs became more unique. And instead of using a well-known song and then just swapping out the lyrics, the songs themselves become their own unique bit of music. And I think the best example of that, this is my humble opinion, is the protest song is a unique piece of art, which is Strange Fruit by Billie Holiday. It was released in 1939. And Strange Fruit was originally a poem that was written by Abel Meeropol, who was a son of Russian Jewish immigrants. And he was really disturbed by the systemic racism in America after he saw a picture of two Black teens who had been murdered and hanging from a tree. And so the poem, which was about the horrors of lynching, was originally called Bitter Fruit, and then it was later put to music, which now becomes Strange Fruit. And it's like I said, we'll have it in our playlist here, but it's a haunting and really beautiful song, complete with like jazz chords. There's a sort of like a sultry rhythm to it, but the lyrics themselves are powerful and super fucking raw. The metaphor of quote unquote strange fruit is transparent. It's Black bodies hanging from a tree. Unlike many protest songs from the past, which again were like new words set to a familiar tune, Strange Fruit was not only new, but wasn't even necessarily a call to action either. It was more to jar people into paying attention and listening to what was going on, and like really be like, wow, let me like really hit you in the gut with some of these lyrics and make you sit and think about the state of things going on right now. Because of its graphic nature, it was banned in the South. I think also a lot of northern states banned it as well too, but it still went on to sell 1 million copies and was later named Time Magazine's Song of the Century in 1999. It ended up being Billie Holiday's biggest hit. I wish I could say it. 1999. Yeah, 1999. Yeah, of the century. I know.
So from 1919,
yeah, we're in
Yeah.
a
all
new
the way
century
on.
now. Ick. Don't worry about it. We'll not think about 25 years into the new century. It's fine. It's a quarter of a
You
century
should.
into.
Why
Yeah.
would you say that out loud?
Just want us to all sit in our.
We want our backs to all ache equally at the same time because it
Yes.
did.
Yes.
I just sit up straighter because I was like, oh, I'm fucking slouching. My
That's a
fucking
lot.
lumbar support.
Ugh. Gross.
Yeah, I'm like my lumbar support's going out right now, dog.
Fucking
Why would you
Christ.
do that to me?
But alas, I wish I could report differently, but one song doesn't immediately make a change. And though Strange Fruit certainly got people thinking and talking, particularly white listeners, which is the most important, the Black freedom struggle carried on into the second half of the 20th century.
Oh, welcome to the break. We have so much history that we are getting through in this episode. We hope you've been enjoying yourself so far as we travel through American history and all of the protest music that accompanies it. Also, a special welcome to Season 5. We are back and we're so excited that you're here. Please make sure that you are liking, subscribing, following the show on whatever platform that you're listening on so that way you get updated for whenever the next episode comes out. And while you're at it, please make sure that you're following us on social media too. We're on Instagram at High Tales of History or on TikTok at High Tales of History Pod. If you want some more content, if you need more High Tales of History in your life, then who doesn't? Everyone loves some history, especially when that history is a little bit high. We have half-baked episodes over there, which are mini episodes. We just have a recent one that we put up about Harriet Tubman, as well as historical cooking videos. We also have our movie tales of history, as we like to call it. That's where we watch a historical movie on my big brown couch and react to it and talk through what's the real history there, what's maybe creative license. We have a lot of fun doing those. And that's over at patreon.com/High Tales of History. If you are a member of the Best Buds Club, you have gotten this episode a full 2 days early, ahead of everyone else. So how about that? That's another little perk that you get, is early release of all of our episodes. All right, well, like I said, we've got a lot of history to get to, so we should probably get back into the second half, but please make sure that you are commenting your favorite protest song picks, and we look forward to seeing what you have picked in your additions, as well as please don't forget that linked in our show notes is our own playlist of all the episode's protest songs. And you can find that in, again, our show notes or on our YouTube page. It's American Protest Songs. All right, we're going to jump into the 60s and 70s now. And there is a whole lot going on in these 2 decades of American history. So with that said, let's puff pass it on to part 2.
Oh, my friends, we are headed into a gloriously prolific period of music. That's the 60s and 70s. On the break, I topped up my, I had more of a smoke and I made myself a little cocktail. So cheers, everybody. For part 2, we're going into the 60s and the 70s. This is my favorite. And I think we're all going to have a lot to talk about in this era of American history because there is a shit ton going on, an absolute shit ton. So we have the civil rights movement, sexual revolution, which included a second wave of feminism and also the women's liberation movement, sexual freedom. So a rise in LGBTQ plus identity, Vietnam War's going on. There is so much social unrest and there's just a mass call for change across many groups of people and minorities. So what we're going to do for this section, because there is so much going on, and also let's be real, there's a lot of really amazing music in this era, also spanning a lot of different genres too, is I'm going to go through the timeline of history over these decades of each movement, and I'm going to try and go in sort of an order of when each movement starts, although there is overlap of nearly all of them. We are going to start with the civil rights movement first. Now, American history books teach the civil rights movement as the mid-50s, typically starting in the year 1954 with the case of Brown versus the Board of Education. In that case, that's when the Supreme Court ruled public school segregation is unconstitutional. The Civil War was an exact century earlier, pretty much an exact century earlier. But the 1950s and 60s did see a resurgence of hymns and spirituals that were used as the anthems for the Black freedom struggle. I think it's kind of fitting. This is just my own 2 cents. I was like, oh yeah, a lot of the most famous leaders of that time were in the church. Like, so Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King,
Mm-hmm.
Reverend Ralph Abernathy
Bayard Rustin
was a close associate of Martin Luther King, naturally became an activist because of his Quaker faith. Even Malcolm X was a spiritual leader, though, like for the Nation of Islam. So like there were a lot of religious leaders that were a part of it, which I think was kind of interesting, with like the use of hymnals and spirituals, like making a resurgence. That's just my own 2 cents of like, oh, that's a really interesting correlation.
Parallel.
You know,
Yeah.
parallel that's happened.
It's kind of like John Brown that we talked about earlier. He was also a member of the clergy. There's a common tie within history where we have religious leaders who can speak to a large group of people at one time and speak on their integrity. That seems to be a focal point in a lot of these stories.
Songs from this particular time period were now called freedom songs. And now they had jazz and blues that they could pull from too. So it was like the hymnals and the old spirituals, as well as some jazz and some blues, like different elements that combined together. Martin Luther King talked about this directly in his 1964 book that was called Why We Can't Wait. And he was saying that he and his fellow activists, quote, sing the freedom songs today for the same reason the slaves sang them, because we too are in bondage, and the songs add hope to our determination that we shall overcome. And that's my first example of a freedom song. So We Shall Overcome has a long history. It's also a little twisty and hazy in some places. It's kind of interesting because it's an amalgamation of a handful of songs. Like, so a couple of them originate back from like 1700s Europe, and they were like religious songs there, I believe. So it's like some little bits of that, like in terms of like melody or like rhythm, and then it's mixed in with some songs of enslaved people in the American South. So like those old spirituals get mixed in too, and then it gets a slightly more like formalized edition of lyrics and like gospel in 1900. Then it first officially appears in 1945 as a protest song called "We'll Overcome." And it was used as a labor protest song in Tennessee in 1945 by Black women who were being seriously underpaid by the Highlander Tobacco Company.
Shocker.
So they used this song. I know, right? So they used the song during their labor protest. And then the famed folk singer, Pete Seeger, he rearranged the words and he changed the title to We Shall Overcome instead of We Will. And he sang it at an event in 1957 that Dr. Martin Luther King was attending. And the song really stuck with Dr. King. And it's like really powerful yet simple verses. And it ended up becoming the anthem of the civil rights movement, one of them. We shall overcome, we shall overcome, we shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I know that I do believe we shall overcome someday. And then other verses go on to say, like, we shall be all right, we shall be all right, we shall live in peace, we are not afraid. So there's like a repetition of each one of those. Not all the songs were spiritual. Not all the songs were peaceful. Some expressed anger and frustration at the going slow of progress with Black folks every day who were experiencing discrimination of all kinds and even fearing for their lives. The song Mississippi Goddamn by Nina Simone is a really good example of that. So she wrote that after the 1963 murder of civil rights activist Medgar Evers in Mississippi. And also around that same time, after 4 little Black girls were killed in the bombing of Alabama's 16th Street Baptist Church. That's a really horrible piece of history. The bombing of the church killed 4 little girls. It is a Black church. And then there's, in that same sort of time period, there's also the murder of Medgar Evers. And so those were 2 particular stories that stuck out to Nina. And so some lyrics from that. Hound dogs on my trail, school children sitting in jail. Black cat crossed my path. I think every day is going to be my last. Lord, have mercy on this land of mine. We're all going to get it in due time. I don't belong here. I don't belong there. I even stopped believing in prayer. Don't tell me, I'll tell you. Me and my people just about do. I've been there, so I know. They keep on saying, go slow. And the chorus, Alabama's gotten me so upset. Tennessee made me lose my rest. And everybody knows about Mississippi. God damn. Like, oh. So it was a real powerful song. I'm also going to put in like some honorable mentions. A Change Is Going to Come by Sam Cooke. And also another really, really popular anthem of the civil rights movement that was sang a lot is Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Yeah.
He's just brilliant. Just anything from his discography is worth listening to. And if you're thinking of this time frame, like whenever you listen to older music, if you just give a little thought on the time that it came out and what the people might have been writing from, I think that really helps you kind of understand and appreciate the music a little bit more, you know? Like I find that a lot of younger people listen to an older song and they're just kind of like, because it doesn't sound like things sound now. But if you really think about the history behind it, it helps you appreciate it. And I love like old Universal monster movies. And a lot of people are like, oh, they're hokey, they're silly, they're cheesy. But
They're
like,
classic.
you know,
It's
the Invisible
art,
Man
dude.
created green screen, and like all of those technologies helped be the building blocks to what we see now. So you have to think about it in the context. And yeah, a lot of these songs, there's a complete different context that you might not be considering because we live in this precious little bubble of now and not really understanding the history behind it. Yeah, we can't be anywhere unless we understand this stuff and where we come from.
The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed at long last, and it banned racial segregation in schools, restaurants, hotels, theaters, etc., etc. It was followed a year later with the Voting Rights Act, which then protected the right to vote for all Black Americans. Remember I said earlier, like, okay, yeah, it allowed like all Black folks to vote, except women. We're gonna make it really, really hard for people to vote. Basically, we're gonna put a lot of weird rules in place and literacy tests and all kinds of gross stuff to like discourage your vote.
Yeah.
So the voting rights
never
right. So textbooks will sometimes define the civil rights era as ending in 1965 once the Voting Rights Act passed, or in 1968. A lot of them say 1968 after the assassination of Martin Luther King.
Yeah, I think that's what I was taught.
I mean, I suppose you could be like, did it never really end? But anyway, fair. But I would argue that the murder of Dr. King, his assassination, it didn't end the fight for equality for Black Americans. Obviously, right? You know, like that wasn't like, oh, that's it, it's done. It changed though what protest looked like. So in terms of like physical protest, like being out on the streets immediately after his assassination and the days that followed, there is this reverberation of shock and anger through America that resulted in a lot of social unrest, riots in a number of major cities. So we're going to pick up on the ripples of that a little bit later in some decades. But I'd like to pivot to another event that was happening in these same years. Okay, so now our next block of the timeline in history, we're going to cue the Huey helicopters. We're going to turn on Fortunate Son. It's a Vietnam War in every Vietnam War movie. You always have a Fortunate Son, and it's always with the helicopter. It's got to be that Huey helicopter.
It's got to be. And like a weird either sunrise or sunset.
Yeah. Shirtless GI.
Always.
Dog tags, cigarette.
Yep.
Sweat.
Headband. Yep. Don't forget it. This is very essential. This is a very, very specific image that I'm used to.
Yeah. It's in all the movies. I had the realization, this was nuts to me. See what you guys think.
Okay.
Of how long that whole conflict was on for. The Vietnam War.
Dude, right? That's what I looked it up and it was like, what, 55 to 75? I was like, holy shit.
It's 20 years.
And I was like, it just kept fucking going. And I was sitting there because I looked up, I had a song immediately that I was like, this is what I thought of for the Vietnam War and war protests, especially at the time in general. And then I was like, no, that wasn't written at the same time as Vietnam. There's no way. Smack dab right during it. And I was like, holy hell, Vietnam went on forever. I'm glad you said that because it's just like, whoa.
And we wonder why the public was so
years.
Like loud
against
like,
it,
charged about it. Like obviously, if you're seeing no progress on something and it lasted that long, clearly this like civil culture is going to be like, the fuck are we doing?
The fuck's going on?
Yeah, exactly.
Shit or get off the pot.
Yeah, at a certain point, you're like, are you fucking done spending money elsewhere? Are you going to do something to help me over here? Because It's looking real empty in that gas tank.
Yeah, it did. It like went on for about 20 years, like I think just under, by all technicalities. And it was, I mean, like all war is, the Vietnam War was fucking awful. And it was also the first televised war for America, which made the huge difference. So we talk about that a little bit in Chick Donahue and the Great Beer Run, where he goes to Vietnam. We discussed the Vietnam War a little bit in that. But and Katie, this was something you mentioned as well too in another episode, was the televisation, the visuals,
the mediation, maybe
the media, the cameras, the journalists.
These are all wonderful.
The information, the information that was coming back to your average American on the television screen at night was like, wait, what? Are you, that's what's going on?
Yeah.
And it really shaped the American opinion on like what was happening. Journalists are there with their cameras, they're taking notes. There's coverage of this war in a way that like hadn't previously been done. And for the first time, Americans were turning on their televisions at night and seeing a daily death toll, like kids in the neighborhood that went off to war, like not coming back, or not coming back alive. They're hearing also reports of like innocent civilians, like whole villages, like women, children. They're hearing these stories like are like what, like that's what we're what.
Yeah.
And so you also had the dying, the flag covered coffins. There's just a lot of really powerful imagery that was coming back to America. On top of that, there's this increasing gap in credibility with the government. So people are now starting to trust the government less during this time period, because the government's going, we are winning. We're doing amazing. We need to keep sending troops over there because we're winning, but they need our help. And we have to keep this draft going. Yet the TV screens at the end of the night are saying different. The newspapers are saying different. And then after the Tet Offensive, that was a real game changer in American opinion too, because that was a complete opposite in what happened versus what the government said. So although the war was started on the basis of preventing the spread of communism, this was part of the larger Cold War that was happening, the rise of the counterculture movement of the 60s left a lot of people, particularly the young people who were directly affected by this war, questioning like, what the fuck are we doing there? Like, I don't want to get drafted. I don't want my friends to get drafted.
I feel like especially with this war, a lot of people know somebody who died. When you have someone close to you die like that, it makes it very different, especially with the negative. I don't know if I should call it negative, maybe the honest review of what was happening, which war is just inherently negative. But, when it comes down to, Johnny that I always rode scooters with, he's never coming back. And when his coffin gets shipped home and you head out to that service, like, it really makes you think, and I'm like, is this even worth dying for? That whole question comes to it, where it's like, I don't even care that it does at some point come down to, I don't even care that you're trying to stop the spread of communism, whatever that is not as important as this person's life in my mind. And if this war wasn't happening, and these people who never see the war, this comes up in the song I picked, when these politicians who've never seen war send these soldiers out there to die, what do they care, and how does that make you feel? Like, it really changes the relationship with your management, maybe would be the word.
Yeah.
We'll just call them upper management.
The upperest of management.
Well, I think that's kind of like the key point with a lot of this stuff. And like, the more we go through history, the more visible things are, the more we understand the relation to ourselves and what our identity is, And I think Vietnam was the one war that, because of the TV cameras and the news coverage, and the song that I chose also talks about this, we start to identify with America, because that's part of us, right? And then what's America's play in this war, because that relates to me. And then we start to take actual stock with our integrity and with our choices and what we're backing, because it reflects on us as well. So that war became something that was a very like personal kind of thing for a lot of people. Not only was it invading your living room because you were watching it on TV, but you also knew people that were going off to war, and those people were supporting the same flag as you. So it became a very personal kind of thing for all of America, as well as it was a war that a lot of people deemed wasn't absolutely necessary. Partly in my thought process is that we were fighting communism, and it's an ideal, right? It's a different political stance instead of World War II, where we were fighting bad guys, you know, we knew they were doing bad things.
Well, also fighting, but like, I mean, think about the, hold on, it'll come back. Oh, buffering. Especially when it got out about like concentration camps and like the genocide that was going on, that makes World War II a lot more palatable if it can even be that way, versus like what you said with the communism. It's like, okay, so what? What is their communism? You're not bringing it to America, so I don't really give a fuck.
It's
so
not
like,
hurting
let
us.
them have whatever they want. Like, why do I care if they're communist or not? Does it work for them? Are they happy? Okay, then why are you sending, you know, my cousins to die or whatever? You know, like,
because you're thinking,
I'm not interested.
You're thinking about innocent and not innocent and whatnot. But when you have something that's going on that we're sending people to die, and it's your neighbor and your friend and your brother and your boyfriend, but they're dying for something that you really don't understand why we're fighting it in the first place, because it's something that you don't understand. Like, we're Americans. We don't have communism. We relatively understand what the concept is, but we don't really know what it is. So like, that became a very trying time for America, and especially, seeing it go on for 20 years, we shouldn't be surprised that there was so much unrest by it, you know? It's just too many question marks going on at one time and no resolution.
And I think those are both like really great things to say and pull from it. Like a note that I made about it was, it's like a compounding effect too. Like there's Vietnam, and there's also civil rights, and there's also women's lib, and also psychedelics, and also environmental concerns, and also
it kind of all like starts to like avalanche out a little bit because they all stick together.
So it's like you're looking around, you're like, there's a lot of shit that's happening right now. Do we really need to worry about outside of our borders and sending our youth to die? So Katie, I feel like maybe do we do like an all hands in? Like, this was a song I picked because I mentioned a moment ago.
And do you think you know what mine is? I'm interested to.
Okay, so I picked. It's like one of my personal favorites is "Fortunate Son" by.
It's a great song.
Creedence Clearwater Revival.
You did. Get in.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was about it. I was like, "Fuck yeah!"
Made to wear the flag. I'm like,
"Fuck
yeah, white and blue." Yeah.
Fucking off. Yes.
Laurel, do you remember when I used to sing this song?
It was so good. Yeah.
I used to sing this one a lot.
And it was the
hell out of my voice.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But I love singing it.
But it was so good though.
Yeah. But it sounded fucking great when I was doing it.
It really did. Yeah. God, Matty's so talented. Now, ironically, this song gets used inappropriately quite a bit. It is very anti-war and also is criticizing class disparity, you know, and who starts the war, who has to fight it. Well, it's often been used as like a pro-American, pro-war song by people who don't use their fucking ears to listen.
People don't listen to lyrics, I found out, and that was like really devastating for me. I was like, you don't. Yeah. Well, I don't know what the words are, dude. I was like, hold on. Whoa, slow, full stop with that one. You mean to tell me you don't know what they're saying? No, but it sounds good. I was like,
guys, I'm such a lyrics person, though. I'm like, I'm listening to that.
As a vocalist and like a writer myself, the fact that so many people just lyrics are, boom, it's like, what are you doing?
Then why do you even do it?
Yeah, get out of here. Go listen to Bach or
fucking
something.
Painful, dude.
You silly goose.
Yeah, I mean, Boston.
Go listen to Boston.
Is that what you said?
Go listen to Bach or something.
Oh, Bach, okay. I was like, Boston. I was like, wait, I like Boston. What do you have against Boston?
No, Boston's
that man's vocal range is incredible. It's Katie's like, hold on. We need to hold on. Wait, what? God damn it, dude. They got the best fucking donuts.
Because of Duncan?
No, the fucking Boston cream, dude. The Boston cream with
You
the
said
custard
I
in
thought
it.
the Dunkin' Donuts.
innocently. They get
No.
Is it Dunkin' Donuts? What can I get you, Chief?
I was
What can I
like,
get
I
you?
mean, I love Dunkin', but like, no. I was like, the Boston cream, dude, with
Bostonians.
the chocolate and the custard in it. It's magical.
It's a good donut.
It's a great donut.
This
It's
is
a great
not
city.
a Dunkin' Donuts ad, but hey, Dunkin'
No,
Donuts
it's
will
not.
sponsor us.
Absolutely.
I'll hold your coffee and drink. I mean, the opening line,
Fucking
sorry.
oath, yes, as I would I. Sorry, go ahead. Fortune Son. It's a great
Yeah.
fucking song.
I mean, just its opening lines. Some folks were born made to wave the flag, who the red, white, and blue. And when the band plays Hail to the Chief, ooh, they point the cannon at you, Lord. Yeah. It ain't me. It ain't me. Right?
Yep.
I know senator's son. I'm not a millionaire's son. Like, I'll still have to go fight the war. I'm not one of them.
Right.
The rich can avoid the draft because they have the means to. So that was that class criticism there in that protest. And then my second pick, we have the question, war. What is it good for?
Fuck yeah.
Say it again. Please, I'm gonna have to make sure I don't go over 5 seconds of bad singing in this episode, or else I'm gonna get sued.
That's good to know.
Now, like, public domain's one thing, but yeah, I'm gonna be like 1,002, 1,000. Okay, cut it off.
More.
Like Universal Music comes after my little tiny ass. They're like, "Hey, we don't
Get the fuck out.
We don't
I
like
fucking
you
heard
using
you
our
sing
music."
that. It's too fucking on key. Should have been more toned
Lawyers
down.
stand up. They're like, no.
Absolutely not. Those fucking stoners.
Hey, if they let
So
war go into rush hour, they'll let it go anywhere. They don't care.
This is true. Yeah, actually.
Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan, like, all bets are off.
I just
It's
had to
fine.
sit through that for the first time in my life. I was not overly impressed, I'm going to be honest with you.
It was cool for then. This is now.
Yeah. I mean, it was plenty silly. It was plenty
I
funny.
love that movie. That's why I went to go see on my 7th grade birthday party at the movie theater.
Really?
Rush Hour.
Oh.
Loved
You were in
it.
7th grade in the 2000s? Oh, that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah, 1997.
I was like,
Yeah, 7th grade in 97. Oh, so good. So yeah, I mean, if you heard the song in that 1997 classic with Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan, Rush Hour, it's
My apologies.
put that down in the great American movies. That's War by Edwin Starr, and that we're going to put that on the anti-Vietnam protest list.
Mm-hmm.
It's straightforward. It gets to the point. War. Good God, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing.
Absolutely
Say
nothing.
it again. It was originally written for the Temptations. That's a little fun fact there for you as a single. But yeah,
Really?
exactly. You say the Temptations, you're like, oh, okay. And they were
I
like,
you like the you guys don't like the Temptations?
No, I like the Temptations,
I love
for
them.
sure.
I just don't hear that.
Oh no, they shouldn't sing that, but I like them.
Yeah, they were not too comfortable with it. They're like, we feel like this
It's not-
might
No.
alienate
Not a
our fan
great
base.
fit.
No.
Yeah.
Temptations had like
Yeah.
pretty music, like beauty
Yeah.
was coming out of them. And this is all
Turn circle.
no, we don't like this. Aggressive.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't sound like Temptation.
We need some dirt under our nails. Y'all are too clean cut for that. I'm gonna have to excuse you out of this one.
So Edwin Starr got it. He crushed the shit out of it. It became the #1 hit on the Billboard charts. So it worked out for him. Also, folk music was really having a heyday. So like you think like the hippies, we got Bob Dylan, Buffalo Springfield, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Pete Seeger, who I mentioned earlier. They're all the folk artists of the day.
Yeah, Katie, what's your song? I'm excited. I have no idea what your choice.
Yeah, you alluded to it. I feel like maybe it's like Slayer or something like that.
Oh,
Because
what
they're
a
like
good...
70s just about. I'm like,
No,
you're right. Okay.
It's not. They didn't write about the Vietnam War.
Okay.
It's War Pigs by Black Sabbath.
Yeah,
Here it is.
It's War Pigs.
All day.
I was sitting there and I was like, fucking war. And then they always send this. And I was sitting there and I was like, what fucking war protest song? And like all the ones that came up like didn't do it for me. And I was sitting there and it just kind of started like playing in my head. I was like, holy shit. And then I looked, it was specifically written right during Vietnam. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, duh.
Absolutely.
That is my favorite Black Sabbath song, which I'm sure it is a lot of people's favorite.
That is a solid choice. And
Lyrically,
bravo.
musically, just.
Thanks, champ.
So I chose The Doors, The Unknown Soldier.
Oh.
It's a good choice. Like when you put that on there, I was like, fuck, I have to come out with a banger or it's not going to hold up.
Well,
and I did. But
it's funny, like I don't know, like I'm 40, right? I hate admitting that, but like my facial hair is already admitting it for me. Back when like Hot Topic and Spencer's was kind of a thing at the mall, you know, there was a Jim Morrison poster and everybody was like, what the fuck is this?
Always.
And then everybody had that opportunity to dive into the Doors and their discography. And I don't feel like it happens too much now, but
No.
Jim had a very special way of writing songs, and in particular, his idea about the military and America was very skewed. He grew up as a military brat and was constantly being shipped around because his dad was in the military. And what Laurel, you were talking about, directly plays into the lyrics for the song. Like, it starts off, wait until the war is over and we're both a little older. The unknown soldier has this like really smoky kind of weird ambiance with keyboard noises and strokes. And then it goes into this very kind of kitschy, jazzy beat. Breakfast where the news is read, television, children fed, unborn living, living dead, bullet strikes the helmet's head. It's wonderful word painting in this because Jim grew up in a military household and had to kind of like understand the strokes of war, but then Vietnam was going on and we were all seeing it happen, but in the household where it's supposed to be a comfortable space where your family is growing and living and you're having your breakfast, getting ready for school, but then on the TV you're seeing people dying, you know, you're seeing the strokes of war in your place of comfort, and understanding that like in your neighborhood some of you are getting ready to go to school while some of you are getting ready to be shipped off to this place to fight this war that you don't understand. And the Doors had this really wonderful way of playing music that they wanted to play, but also kind of playing music that's abstract to the lyrics. They didn't always do the same word painting with their music. It was almost sarcasm, especially with this song, because they have this really light, playful kind of music, jazzy kind of stuff going on, but then speaking about this real guttural situation that we all kind of were experiencing at that time in America. I think it's a very misinterpreted and underappreciated song just because of that fact. There's a lot of really interesting poetry going on that people don't really understand unless they're really listening to the music along with the words. It's supposed to be almost like kind of a sarcastic way of saying what's going on in America at the time.
That's good. Ooh, those are good ones. War Pigs.
Yeah, fucking showed up. Dude, I forgot to read the spot in the lyrics that I even like.
Yeah, go for it.
Politicians hide themselves away. They only started the war. Why should they go out to fight? They leave that all to the poor. Yeah. Time will tell on their power minds, making war just for fun, treating people like pawns in chess. Wait till their judgment day comes.
So we have some more protests. So the 1960s brought that second wave of feminism. May 1960, the pill, capital T, capital P, the pill, was introduced, but it didn't become more widely available until 1965, when the Supreme Court case of Griswold versus Connecticut ruled that a state ban on contraceptives violated a couple's right to marital privacy. It comes out in 1960. It's not until like 5 years later where married couples can finally just get it and get a prescription for it. And then it's 2 years later in 1967 when unmarried women were able to get a prescription for oral contraception. There was a freedom in being able to have sex and enjoy sex without the worry of pregnancy. So it's like, what? Or also like not worrying about if her partner refuses to wear a condom, or it's like, I'm going to take it off. Right? Like, so put a lot more power in women's hands. I mean, I want to do so. Like, I am fully aware that people can get pregnant on the pill. It can happen. Just speaking in terms of like general terms, women felt like a lot more freedom and being able to have like some control over that. Committed or married couples can also have sex more freely if they if they so desire, without the fear of another mouth to feed. So like women kind of felt like baby machines, or like anytime that they had sex, like, am I get pregnant? I don't know. And now, all along with this newfound sexual freedom, women were also then bumping up against misogyny in all the other ways. So in the workplace, there's a lack of equal pay for equal work, or there's just also this prevailing societal view of like a woman's place, like women shouldn't have careers. They should be at home raising all these babies. So because of all these other movements and protests going on in the 60s and 70s, young women that were a part of like the civil rights or the anti-war movements, they were trying to get involved and do something like, I want to do my part and get involved. They were finding that their efforts were frequently blocked or dismissed by male leaders in these movements, who felt like the women should also just kind of like stick to making food for everybody, go on a food run, make some sandwiches, hey, be secretary, copy this up, and write this thing. And they're like, we want to do more than that. So I have a couple of entries for new wave feminism. And this one, I'm so excited about it. I want you guys to all, if you're not familiar with the song, which I was not before researching this, and I kind of am surprised that I've not heard it before, because it apparently is a very popular tune, but it is The Pill by Loretta Lynn, and that came out in 1975. And this is such a cool song.
Loretta,
it's my new favorite.
Such a queen.
She is so cool, isn't she? I was like, how did I not know that this song? It's like one of her most famous songs. I was like, I'm clueless. So that's on our musical playlist for this episode. Please take a listen. It's a total banger. But it's basically a celebration of not having to be a baby machine anymore for her man, and how unhappy she had been in that role. And she felt like it had been kind of pushed upon her. And then like later she then celebrates that she can have fun now. She wears cute clothes and she can have sex. And she can also enjoy it too. Like there's the whole last line is about like, hey, we're gonna do it. We're going to do it later, but hey, I've got the pill. Don't worry, baby. And that's like how the song ends. And I'm like, that's fucking amazing. What a song. What a song for the ages. I think just also for women too, I think it's gotten better more recently, but even for such a long time, there's that stigma of talking about sex and sexuality for women especially, or have like a woman's pleasure in sex. And so there have been these like big markers in history where people have embraced their sexuality more, or conversations have been easier to have. And the 60s and the 70s were one of those eras. We do talk about that in the History of Sex, part 2. That's episode 70. I get to sit down with my other bestie, Kelly, and we talk about the history of sex. And we talk about like the pill and like what that looks like. Just a little snapshot of women's lib. Another one I want to put in. Y'all know this one. I Am Woman by Helen Reddy, 1971. I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar.
Oh, no, I'm on the wrong one.
No, Shaka Khan's a great one. That's a great example. Shaka Khan's one of the coolest people and very talented. No, I'm Every Woman by Shaka Khan. We'll put that on the list too.
Thank you.
No, in I Am Woman in 1971, that's the one. It's I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar. I am woman, hear me roar. Yeah, it numbers too big to ignore. One. Yeah, and I know too much to go back and pretend. Love that line. Because I've heard it all before, and I've been down there on the floor, and no one's ever going to keep me down again. Yes, I am wise, but it's wisdom born of pain. Yes, I've paid the price, but look how much I've gained. If I have to, I can do anything. I am strong. I am invincible. I am woman. Like what a power anthem that is, right? Yeah. So, and that's a classic, like, I am woman. It has like that 60s sound, that early 70s, 71. Yeah, those are my entries. The pill and I Am Woman. But Katie, I like I'm Every Woman by Shaka Khan.
There you go. That's it. There's my entry. I did it organically.
Yeah. She is cool. So cool.
There's also a lot of protest, not just there, but of other minorities happening at that time, like the indigenous protests that were going on.
Thank you so much. Yeah, let's say I think it was like late 60s. There was the mid to late 60s. There was the formation of the American Indian Movement, which is an organization. They did various protests at different locations. We actually I did an episode about the occupation there at Alcatraz Island.
It's actually a really fun episode 49. Because I never even knew that happened. Like that was totally news to me when you covered that.
Yeah. So that's episode 49 if you want to dig more into that. But yeah, that was a protest on Alcatraz. the native occupation of Alcatraz, led by the American Indian movement. And then they also did another famous protest at Wounded Knee. It was called the Wounded Knee Incident. So yeah, there's, I mean, all groups of all minorities basically through the 60s and 70s, I feel like there's all a call for change in all these groups of like, hey, what, there's like this sort of like conscious awakening. I know it's very like hippie sounding, but like it just seemed like that was like, and that because that's what they were riding that wave of, but yeah, there's a lot of that happening.
It probably also, if you think about it, what made the Vietnam War so infamous also is probably what made all the civil protest, unrest, and strive for civil rights at the time also have a bigger boom, as they were also televised at the same time.
I've got a song by Redbone, an all native rock group.
Absolutely.
We were all wounded at Wounded Knee. So I'll put that on the playlist as well too. I think that's a good example. I don't want to move out of the 60s and 70s without addressing the protest within that community.
Yeah. I mean, you're fucking welcome.
So thank you. I was like,
take that on the way back. Because Laurel's like, that was almost too perfect. As I was my brain cell will jump back over to you now.
I'll hook into that. Thank you so much. 1969 was the Stonewall Uprising. We did an episode on that. And there are a lot of watershed movements around that same sort of time. And the difference with protest songs for LGBTQ plus community in this time period was there was more coded lyrics. People were closeted for the most part during this time period. Right. So it was more of like a coded lyrics that alluded to a gay relationship or crush. There were some that talked like more overtly about gender fluidity or transgender folks. I think the Kinks, like the song that was always coming to mind was Lola by the Kinks. The Kinks had a lot of music that was like, is this a little bit gay? I think so. I think they are. It's understood. I think like the news on this has changed a little bit, but it was understood for a long time that both Ray and Dave Davies were bisexual. I think Dave's since said that he's straight, but so like we're like, oh, the Kinks, they're bisexual. Like, okay, or like the brothers are. So they had a lot of coded music. All the Young Dudes by Mott the Hoople. That's considered a more LGBTQ plus song. Originally, David Bowie was part of that too. I think like if you're a lover of classic rock, there's like a handful of artists who like particularly in the 60s and 70s experiment with their sexuality or were gay and closeted. But there wasn't just like a lot of explicit dialogue necessarily through song. But I definitely think the disco and the club scene, I'm Coming Out by Diana Ross. Oh my God. Right. Episode 78. There we go. We talked about that too. Strongly associated with the LGBTQ plus folks. And also it was in Black queer identity too. Black and brown queer identity. So like that was a very specific music form that was a form of protest. Glam rock. I mean, you had boys in their long hair and their makeup and their
tight pants.
Yeah, David fucking Bowie, Freddie Mercury. I mean, you have sexy rock and roll, androgyny. So there's like some experimentation in like communication through the art that is the icon, but I kind of think more of like disco and like that club scene was more, but not necessarily explicitly like protest music though. So there weren't a lot of mainstream songs.
Well, it is kind of its own like subtle form of protest because at least if
I agree,
you have this coded music because like it has to be coded due to like the public violence that could be involved with being outspoken, and that's why like the whole movement is such it's a courageous thing to begin with, because like if you come out and you're loud about it, you're going to be met with backlash. There's going to be violence that comes along with it. So it's a really interesting thing that music was such a focal point with a lot of the LGBTQ community to be able to kind of express their lifestyle and keep it coded so that it was everyone's safety, but also like this kind of underground speakeasy way of communicating with each other. Like, hey, you're not alone. I'm with you. Like, it's kind of a beautiful thing. And if it wasn't, for art, we wouldn't have been able to have that. And I think that's like kind of like the way that music really does bridge people together, because you can do that kind of thing And for certain people that understand the wavelength that you're speaking or singing with, you can communicate properly, you know, and it comes in on full radar, but then other people are like, oh, this is a catchy number. And they have no fucking clue because they don't understand the dialect that it's coming from.
Yeah.
But still made him a fan.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Still kind of a victory.
Right.
I think that's a really great thing to point out. Like, it is, in a sense, an explicit protest then, you know, with the coding. The coding makes it an explicit protest.
Yeah.
I think that's a really great take on it. Yes, Katie.
Does anyone else feel like the song I Want to Break Free by Queen is absolutely a coded?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Because I was like, that
totally.
was always that's one of my favorite Queen songs next to the Seven Seas of Rye.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh my gosh, you're right. Oh God, Katie.
Anytime like I think of that, it's just like I sing that and it's like I understand how that song was sung from Freddie. And then I understand how that song can just represent more than that to even the average listener, anything they're trying to escape in their life. But especially just since you were in the LGBTQ, I was like, hey, I'm just going to put my little 2 cents in there. I'm going to put my whole 25 cents in because Queen is just so stacked. I get a full 25
One whole quarter.
Yeah, I get 1 whole quarter and I'm going to put that in.
I like that.
You ready for me to be the asshole?
No, don't do it. What?
Totally agree. And you're right. You're right.
Okay.
It is. The reason why I don't I was like, I can't add that one.
Yeah.
It's because we're talking about American protest music.
Fucking hell.
I'll put it on the playlist because you're right. It is a protest song.
In protest to America, they banned it here and they there was a way to buy the VHS anyway.
Okay. Well, you know what? You've redeemed it. We'll put it on the list.
Wasn't
there
it
we
recorded?
go. Thank you. You know I love my Freddie Mercury and Queen. Like I like
how Katie's like, no, I'll
right.
find a way to get it over here.
But I gotta talk American protest.
The actual escalation of Queen being what Queen was happened in America, and an immigrant in America is still American, in my perspective.
Oh, what an interesting.
And War Pigs is definitely not American. And now that I said that, I was
like, that's right.
Because it's the UK.
Shit, that's all right. Whatever. We'll throw a couple Brits in. We'll throw a couple Brits in.
It was written about the Vietnam War. It was specifically centered at that war at the time.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And Ozzy's American now, isn't he?
I think he is probably at this point.
Yeah, but sorry, not to contradict or anything, but
okay,
we didn't start as Americans, right? But protest became a focal point in America. America was a breeding ground for protesting, where other countries didn't really have the kind of avenue to be able to protest. The country was founded on protest. You know, we wouldn't have this country without it. So
we fucking started this place so we could argue.
I think possibly it still fits in with what we're talking about without explicitly being American protest, because we kind of own protest. And if you're not protesting, you're kind of one of the other side.
Mm-hmm.
You should be arguing. I think we're really good at it. That's our whole.
Yeah. That's why we exist.
So you're saying if even if it's used here, it should still be included.
Yeah. I mean, if it's for a conversation that involves this, what we're doing here in America, I don't see why that's not applicable.
Mm-hmm. Folks, have you seen what we've been doing here? A protest has happened.
Yeah.
A protest. They've stated their points. They've stated why we feel we should be able to include certain songs, even if they aren't by an explicitly American artist. Yeah. And they have brought them to my attention. They said, "Hey, look, this is something that I think we can change." And you know what? Me being the benevolent God that I am, I love that, and you're right. Yes, that's right.
May I also make the argument onto Maddie's? I'm gonna fucking finish this. I'm gonna put my little cabbage leaf on my little thing, and I'm gonna fucking point this one out to the outfield. Are you ready?
Okay.
This is where we're going. Is not every protest American? Isn't there not something American about every protest? Isn't that the spirit of America?
Yes.
So therefore, it fucking counts.
No,
okay.
That's what I'm saying. I'm sorry, but
all right.
Okay, so not to get too political, but Colin Kaepernick, everybody was all to do about this man going down on a knee.
I thought it was Capper.
Kaepernick?
Is it caper as in the capers, or is it
I've always said
capper?
I'm not
That's
sure.
what I always said as well.
I don't know the man personally, but I do remember a lot of people being really upset that he was protesting
Yeah.
on a global scale because everybody was watching the games, but they were upset in a country that was founded via protest.
On protest.
And it's like,
yeah.
What the fuck? You know, like, you might not like what he's protesting, but he should have the avenue to do as such. Like, I don't understand being upset about the man for protesting.
Plus, it was very nonviolent.
Yeah.
Like, very nonviolent.
I think it's one of those, like,
very moving, but very peaceful. So
it's the American thing to be upset about protest because it's not on the same side of your protest, you know?
It's not your protest.
Yeah, like, you don't agree with him, so you're like, gross, don't do that. But then when somebody else that fits your agenda, they protest, you're like, fuck yeah, America. And I think that's a very, very American thing. Like, that's one of the, like, focal points of our society that has always been here. And so, like, if you don't protest with the things that upset you, then you are not American. So I absolutely agree with you, Katie. Like, I think protest is something America it's a building block of who we are and why we are what we are, why everyone here should have a voice and why everyone should protest.
And I even said, like, towards the beginning of the first half about how protest is literally written in the Declaration of Independence. So you are right. It is the most American sort of thing. And you know what? I'm here. I'm going to add a little layer to our onion here. I think if you love America, if let's say you're American, right? I don't want to, I know this is a global audience. I don't want to make too many assumptions. But if you are American and you love your country, even if you're not happy with it all the time, if you're like, I'm happy that I live here, whatever. I think whatever side of the political aisle, right? Like, I think of whatever side, quote unquote, side that you're on, you would have the same agreement of, like, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Freedom, like, that's our thing. America, freedom, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the American dream, like, however you want to define that, right? Like, you guys can both people can agree on that, and that's like that American thing. Is like, we want the best for this country that we live in. It's not that we hate the country. You want it's like a friend, you know, you're like, oh, sometimes you piss me off and I want the best for you. So I'm going to, like, intervene and I'm going to, you know, step in because I don't want to see bad things happen to you. It's kind of, you know, and I think that's a very American thing
is what you're saying. Yeah, I agree. Thank you for
in that American DNA and in those very old documents that founded the country, you know, the Declaration of Independence. It's in it. So.
Like, I think that's the common misconception of America, is that we constantly think of America as this, like, border that we have created, that these are the states and we all vote on this stuff within these boundaries that are invisible and they don't matter. But America, essentially, the way that we built this country to be is the people within it. The people within it, we are America, you know? Because we are the ones that vote for the parliament that is saying, you know, what the rules are, and when they're
parliament. How English of you.
Snuck in, folks.
Congress.
Right.
Because Katie's like, dear heavens, no. Like, you can leave your. Actually, you can leave my berries at the door. I fucking love berries. But yeah.
We choose who's running what. And if they're not running it the right way, we're saying, fuck you, get out of here. We're going to vote somebody else in.
Get the fuck out.
And
who voted you in?
It's supposed to be the people that are running this shit. You know, that's the whole point of America. That's what we built to begin with.
Deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
Well, dude, somebody read the Constitution before they sat down here today.
The Declaration of Independence once again.
Rad as hell, dude. Protest is the name of the game. You know what else is protest, y'all?
What?
Punk music.
Punk. There
Get
it is.
in.
Punk music.
Speaking of DNA of protest, right? Like, goodness gracious. Punk rock.
What a better way to get your point across than being loud and fast and fucking entertaining as hell. Punk music.
Right.
Punk music.
And usually some form of undress as well. But yes.
Also that,
Yeah, punk is protest, right? That is just one big... And that, I mean, sorry. It kind of, punk has a very specific sound. Very specific, sorry, I don't want to be that person who's like sounds very anti-punk, but I was about to say, oh, punk music kind of sounds kind of the same to me, but I do appreciate it. I know. So I was like, I'm not going to say that.
Whoa.
That sounds
You
like
just made the
racket.
full Midwestern in me come out. I was like, whoa. I whoa'd you 3 times. And I had to throw my hands up. Do not make me slap my thighs and turn this fucking casserole around. I swear to God. I will.
My golly.
Oh, I will throw away these leftovers without eating them.
Okay, well, you tell me you have a punk song. You have a punk protest song.
Red, White, and Brainwashed by Anti-Flag. Get it? They use the flag to control us, brainwash you to be their patriotic slaves, brainwash you by controlling what we learn. The only difference from the Nazis is that someone tried to stop them. Red, white, and brainwash. Get in. You were not ready for what I was bringing to this fight today. Oh.
I was not. I was not.
You weren't.
No, thank you. Good.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I can't hear toss, but thank you. It's so fucking relevant, by the way. So just like...
All right, so I chose Holiday in Cambodia by the Dead Kennedys, San Francisco band. Vocalist Jello Biafra was very big on protest and had a very colorful way of speaking about some of his ideas about the world around him. In particular, he really liked to point out that California really had no idea about global politics, how the world worked, and what other people had to suffer. And that was a focal point within the lyrics. So we're going to have the link in the comments for you to be able to check out the Dead Kennedys' Holiday in Cambodia if you've never heard it before. It's a favorite of mine. Some of the lyrics are a little bit more than I can vocalize right now for you guys.
Sure.
But yeah, you should dive in. I think it's a really cool.
Yeah, I'll put it on the list. That's a good one. I said a hip hop, a hippie to the hippie, a hip hip hop. You don't stop rocking to the bang bang boogie. Say up jump the boogie to the rhythm of the boogie to beat.
Laurel has very quickly gone to her favorite.
Well, what you hear is not a test.
Done with punk anyway.
Let me do the whitest rapping you're ever going to hear in your life. They're like that sounds like a 39-year-old Midwestern white mom that's trying to do
at
that.
Least like, on fucking rhythm, okay? If you sound white while doing it, guess what? You're Caucasian as fuck, girl. But like, you are.
I am. So that's 1979, the very end of the 70s. But we get the Sugar Hill Gang's Rapper's Delight, and that hits the airwaves and introduces wider audiences to hip hop music and rapping. But that's like the first mainstream instance of hip hop. That's kind of like where like mainstream hip hop is like, oh, that's the thing that we can point to. But that's not the birth of hip hop, though. That's a much cooler story. So we're gonna rewind back August 11th, 1973. It's a back to school party in the Bronx. DJ Kool Herc. He is a budding DJ, and he is spinning at his sister's back to school party. And he played on his turntables. He played 2 copies of the same record. Boop boop boop. Extended the instrumental break beat, or like the drum section, to create a longer beat just for people to dance to. So he just extended it longer. And he's like, oh yeah, go ahead, go dance. People are like, oh, I'm feeling it. I'm dancing. Breaking, or AKA break dancing, but breaking as it's properly called, was also born around this time in the Bronx. So with that, he also rapped over that extended break beat. People are like, this is amazing. Hip hop. Like,
who thought of this?
Revolutionary. So 1973, that is like technically the birth of hip hop with DJ Kool Herc. Then we're going to go forward a little bit. We're going to get to 1977. This is just like a really interesting thing that I learned about the influence of the New York blackout in 1977 and what that did for hip hop. This is really interesting. So New York City, tensions were really high. Economics of the city were not good. It was basically like, unless you were in like that heart of Manhattan, like Wall Street, in Manhattan, there was a lot more wealth. And then like the neighborhoods, or like the neighboring boroughs, there was a lot more wealth disparity in those neighborhoods. And there was a blackout in 1977, and it caused waves of looting across the city. There's this like influx of wealth for these Black and brown neighborhoods. Like one guy might have been like, I just stole like a lot of sneakers.
Mm.
You have turntables, because that was like a thing that got stolen. A lot of like DJ equipment.
Or like radios
Right.
of cars and stuff. Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, well, I'm going to trade you some of these sneakers for some of those turntables. They would make these trades. Then there's a lot more DJ equipment that is out. So whereas there before, there were like just like a handful of DJs in the 70s in New York. All of a sudden, a lot more DJs, like a lot more like budding DJs, people that were like, I would love to be able to do that, except I don't have the equipment to do so, to like start. And that was really where there's like more of an explosion of various hip hop and dance and rap. I was like, wow,
I didn't know that. That's cool.
That was a really interesting story to read in that. So that's in my notes. The Mercedes ladies. It's an interview. Yeah. So let's also look at what's going on in history, right? So 70s, boop, into the 80s. That wealth disparity that I was talking about a moment ago really starts to grow around like 1983.
You're going to fucking love the song I picked, just so you know, because you keep literally hitting on like the wealth disparity is specifically what my song is centered around. And I was like,
keep it,
I'm
hold
so
it.
Fucking smart.
Good. So like, brush your shoulders. You're like, wow, I am so amazing at picking songs. It's so good. There's a lot of things that are going into like a shit cauldron and bubbling away. When we're looking through the lens of that American protest music, there aren't, kind of read between the lines of what I'm saying here with this one, there aren't a lot of very specific things that are going on rocking the political climate in comparison to the 60s and 70s. There's stuff going on for sure, but in comparison to like how many different movements we were talking about, is a little bit different in the 80s. Ronald Reagan was president pretty much all through the decade. So from 1981 to 89. And during his administration, like he and Nancy, his wife, they carried on the war on drugs. And they, which had already been going on for a number of years, but the Reagans brought the Just Say No campaign.
Yeah.
You know, quote unquote war on drugs. That started with Nixon in terms of that verbiage. But that prohibition really actually goes back to the early 20th century and then just became more formalized as the century went on. We really dig into that on that Cannabis episode 58. But I did want to like bring back and recycle some information that I talked about in that episode. So in 1944, sorry, we went from the 80s back to the 40s. I know, sorry. So 1944, Harry Anslinger was the guy who was like, he just really had a boner about like anti-cannabis. He was like, let's get rid of the devil's lettuce. The New York Academy of Medicine released an extensively researched report, which became really popular. It was known as the LaGuardia Report. And it countered every single one of Anslinger's points, like all of the kind of propaganda, all of the things that he was saying about it. He was like, this is why we need to get rid of cannabis. Now, these researchers were like, not only did cannabis not induce violence, insanity, criminal behavior, sex crimes, or was a gateway drug, but research at that point, again, this is 1944. I know research changes over time, but they had said like, also there are some medical uses for it that we could probably really benefit from as human beings. And maybe we should look into that. And also New York alone, just New York City alone, cannabis arrests were wildly disproportionate by race, with 78% of the arrests being Black and brown folks. Now, Anslinger was pissed and he was like, this is an unscientific report. Like all the researchers with all like the letters and PhDs and stuff. Yeah, those guys, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about, apparently.
Nah, dude.
So by the time then we get to the 80s and then going through to the early 90s, there is still that disproportionate number of Black and brown folks who were incarcerated for drug offenses. Large and small.
Still happens.
Yeah.
Even today. You can watch it. There's a thing on Netflix, isn't there, where they tell you about it? It's really interesting.
Yeah, Grass is Greener documentary. I'm not sure if it's still on there, but yeah, that was what
people should watch it. It's really informative. It's good stuff.
It's good. But then on top of that, this is also the crack epidemic, which really hit Black neighborhoods hard, also disproportionately, right? There are so many layers to that. I feel like I just kind of like, woo, let me just drop this little cultural historical bomb into the mix because there's a lot to be said about it, and then be like, right, let's move on.
Yeah.
But here are the main points. There's this crack cocaine epidemic, and There's also a major uptick in gang violence, because also that wealth gap between Black and white Americans really begins to diverge. 83, I believe. I have a 2022 report from the National Bureau of Economic Research in the show notes that like talks about this a little bit more if you want like the numbers and the research. But basically the poor neighborhoods were getting poorer, and then there's like crack all over the damn place, and then gang violence, and then there's a law enforcement response to all of it. So like boom, 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 boom. So Black music of the 80s and into the early to mid 90s channeled all the frustrations and the anger of that. There's a lot of talk about what life is like on the streets, what the violence is, the threat of violence for between gangs, like between other people within your neighborhood, or the police, or police brutality was a big topic. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to kind of rewind back a little bit in time, and I'm going to throw out The Message by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five.
Yeah, dude. Good call.
So that's how's that one? Don't push me, 'cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. That song's been sampled a whole bunch of times.
Yeah. Puff Daddy.
Even like in my
one.
But yes, but also like one of my personal favorites that I like to quote, and I like to quote it as a parent, is chickadee, check yourself before you riggedy wreck yourself. Check yourself before you riggedy wreck yourself. Chickadee, check yourself before you riggedy wreck yourself. I leave out the shotgun bullets are bad for your health, but I because I'm just
maybe
like,
you should add them in. It might help. I mean,
at some point it might be necessary.
I leave out the last line. I leave out the last line there, but yeah, I like to quote a little Ice Cube to my 4-year-old in the whitest way possible. And but yeah, so 1982, the Message came out from Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, which was not 5 or even 6 people. It was more of like a person who wasn't even in the studio to do it. But yeah, the Message is purely like one of the first message-based hip-hop protest songs. And then I'm also going to follow it up with Fight the Power by Public Enemy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's a real call to action song.
Yeah, I straight up, like, on the way to work the other day, I pulled up Public Enemy, and that was the first one I thought about. And I listened to that twice over, because I was like, fuck, this is a banger. God bless those men for, like, writing music that actually had something to say, but saying it in such a positive manner. It's actually, like, rooted in a place of prosperity. It's wanting something better for people, and it's not trying to be negative. It's more so a positive, and just trying to get other people to like kind of wake up to the fact that like these things are horrible. We can make it better, and let's do it better, and that like Public Enemy, like they were so good at that.
Yeah, and some protest songs, are there to create space for dialogue.
Right.
Yeah, like to be like, hey, here's this message, here's the feeling that's there. Like, let me like sit and be uncomfortable in that and your feelings with it, and then like let's be able to come to the table. I think there's also something just to add more to it, if for what it's worth, is I think, and look, I understand I am a white woman that is saying this, and I have definitely a lot of relative privilege for sure. With marginalized communities, there's, and especially for Black Americans, right? There's such a constant pushing down oppression, segregation, racism, like all these things that like Jim Crow laws, enslavement, and then Black Lives Matter. Like there's all these things that are happening throughout American history constantly against a certain group of people that like, I just would like to say, like, is it understandable then if a song or if somebody is coming from a place of just like, I am so fucking fed up and angry,
right.
Like just hear my anger, because all I can do is just scream right now, or like just pour myself out like that in that way. Right. But yeah, and I think so. Yeah, I mean that, and I think that's like the fun diversity of protest songs is like not only all the different things that one can be talking about in the protest, but like how it's delivered too. Like, are we creating a space for dialogue, or is this just like, I need you to hear me?
Right. Is it
roar
dialogue
with it.
or is it venting? Like, because sometimes like you need a space for that, and everybody
Yeah.
wants to have that thing to be able to explore a little bit. Like sometimes you are going to listen to music because you're fucking angry and you want to hear angry music, and that's it. Like that's what you want to plug into. And then sometimes you want to listen to something that inspires you to bring you to a place that you're not at right now, but you want to be there. And that's kind of the cool part of it. Like Public Enemy has this kind of inspirational, aspirational way of communicating, to where it's like we can do this, we can get through this, and it's very like positive, And then you've got NWA and Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, where they're just like, this shit sucks, we don't want to deal with it, but this is what we're dealing with. It's honest, and there's something really beautiful about that, actually.
Yeah.
So
Laurel, what were your songs?
So like I said, the message.
They're not gonna be as good as mine, so mine goes last.
I said the message by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. I feel like is like the first kind of example in my heart, at least. And then Fight the Power, Public Enemy. But then I would even go into like just a little bit into the early '90s. We got a little Tupac. Changes.
Hey, fuck off. That's mine. That's mine. It's Changes by Tupac. You fuck right off.
Really?
That's mine.
You can have it. That was my honorable mention. Was Tupac. You get it. You go.
Dude,
you have it. Take it.
Changes by Tupac. That was it. That was my song.
Angel, man. That dude was so fucking cool.
But that song specifically refers to that disparity between wealth and the crack neighborhood. Like literally everything you were talking about. I was like, oh my God, she's going to get a raging hard on when she hears this. Because that's exactly what I picked.
Heard that song all the time on the radio.
Yeah.
And I was just like,
oh yeah, Changes.
Tupac.
That was it was everywhere.
Yeah.
So a lot of the hip hop from the 90s was influencing other music and other people. And a group that was formative for me was 311. They were from the Midwest, 4 white guys, a Hispanic man that came from just a regular podunk town in the Midwest, started making music that involved reggae and rap and metal and all of these different genres into one thing. And they were kind of able to speak about the common man and bringing up some of the relevant issues for them and being able to protest about those things in their own way. And one song in particular off of their second album, Grassroots, was Offbeat Bare Ass, which is a ridiculous song title, and they're kind of known for being a little bit ridiculous.
As a Blink-182 fan, I approve.
Right. And if you listen to the song, there is specifically a verse about an offbeat bare ass, and I'm not going to spoil it for you. If you want to listen to it, it'll be in the links with everything else. But there's a wonderful space for actually speaking about big things that are important. And one of those things that was important to 311 at the time was the legalization of marijuana. And in the third verse, they dive into that, which is really cool for me. The war on drugs may be well-intentioned, but it falls fucking flat when you stop and mention the overcrowded prisons where a rapist gets paroled to make room for a dude who has sold a pound of weed. To me, that's a crime. Here's the good people doing time, y'all.
Yeah. You guys drank in sync. That was fucking rad.
I know.
Twins.
That's a good one.
Yes.
That's a relevant one as well.
I would say. That's
a very good line to put in there. Yeah, and we'll have the rest of the song in there, so and then in our playlist so people can listen to it. Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the 90s, and it's funny that when you talk about 311, I remember first hearing 311 and those like popular singles that they had on the radio on the alternative music station, Q101. And grunge music was huge too. I feel like grunge, very similar to punk, was like very protesty in and of itself, because it was like rock kind of stripping itself back. It's like anti-glam of the 80s and the excess. And they're like, we're going to, like stripped on our performances. We're just going to
fucking wear that long sleeve shirt under that short shirt.
We're going to get that flannel going and just get our hair in our face and like, we're going to sing. So that was, I mean,
you went
grunge,
a little
rock music
step there. All the Girl Scouts.
Something about on the concrete. Oh, damn.
I love this
Damn
place. This place where I'm at.
Shit.
Poor grunge. We just came for it so hard. Except for Alice in Chains. They're fucking great.
I do love grunge. I was like the music I typically listened to in the 90s for the most part. And B96 was like a mix of like Tupac on one station, and then I'd have like, Nirvana
really
on the other, and it just kind of
it's
bounce
fine.
back and forth, right?
It's acceptable.
But
you had to get cultured.
Yeah, had to. At 8, but like and just speaking on like girl power in a sense, like that was like also girl rock bands like the Riot Girl, but I mean, man, we're talking protests. I mean, we can't finish this episode without saying something about old Rage Against the Machine. Killing in the Name is making its rounds on social media right now. But I mean, like Rage Against the Machine is like the political rock music.
I love that aspect of the 90s actually, because it became a time where music was really pulling people together and actually helping people understand that it might not be happening to you, but it's happening to somebody right now, and you can understand it, Like, we were very kind of influenced by all levels of music. Like, we had Yo MTV Raps on MTV. We had like Top 9 at 9 and all these different things that were like kind of like presenting all these different facets of music and understanding a different perspective that maybe you wouldn't have listened to otherwise, And so maybe through that like forced avenue, it kind of gave you a different awareness, of what, other people have to say about the world. It was cool.
Yeah. And when you guys bring up the 90s, it kind of even like, it just kind of like clued into me. I was like, wow, even down to like a pop punk level, people were protesting.
Yeah.
Even, oh God, what's the anthem, part 2? Everything has fallen to pieces. The earth is dying. Help me, Jesus. We need guidance. We've been misled. We're young and hostile, but not stupid. Corporate leaders, politicians, kids can't vote. Adults elect them. Laws that rule the school and workplace. Signs that caution 16's unsafe. It really, like, protest. It is protest. It's protest against, like, stop shoveling your propaganda and your government agenda down the youth's throats.
Right.
So that's what you're doing, and it's, I don't know, there's something kind of magical about that. Just kind of when you said grunge, Laurel, it made me think, I was like, wow, the 90s was such an era of that. Even look at to go to, like, Katie's, like, high school love, don't make fun of me, when I was like obsessed with Green Day. There's a war on drugs right there, because Green Day is named for their love of cannabis. And then even like Blink, the class disparity, you can do this, kid, because the lead singer, and I think definitely the bassist, I don't know about the drummer, they grew up poor as fuck. And like a lot of times they were able to eat dinner and lunch because they worked at the barbecue joint during the day. So they were able to get food to bring home, because like they didn't have it otherwise. So they were poor. They were stoners. They were angry at the government for sending people that they loved to wars that they didn't understand. It's like, it's all there. Just like kind of when you said 90s, I was like, whoa. None of those were my picks though, by the way.
Well, then, I'm going to I'll fast forward things a little bit to 9/11, the following war on terror.
Fucking get in.
I feel like directly after 9/11, of course, if you remember the day, there was immediately in general, I know this wasn't everybody, I'm speaking in broad strokes here, but there's like a galvanizing of the American people. Like, we all are Americans together, and like, like how
that was
how
like the last time I remember this country united.
Oh yeah.
If you want to know from my point of view.
And a lot of music at that time reflected it. So it was like protest, but it was like in a sense of like protesting wrongs done to the country. Is very patriotic music. I mean, the song that comes to my head is Courtesy or the Red, White, and Blue by Toby Keith. I was like, yeah. Like it or hate it.
No, but that's an excellent representation.
It was very pro-American. There's a lot of anger and frustration expressed in these songs. I mean, I feel like that was kind of like the immediate knee-jerk reaction. But certainly there were people, especially as the war on terror went on as long as it did, we're kind of like in Vietnam, where people are like, wait a second, why are we there so long? And why is this exactly what's going on? Similar to Vietnam, there is more media coverage. Like this is the birth. I totally forgot about this, Matt, but like this was like the birth of like around the clock news when the War of Terror came.
Right.
Like otherwise there's like evening news or like news at 11, you know, kind of thing. Like you get it a couple times a day.
24/7.
And it was around the clock, just footage, you
Notice
know.
how we've never
like,
recovered as humanity once that started.
No.
It's still going.
It's crazy correlation. Maybe we're supposed to just like not fight our fight every day, and we're allowed to step back, log off, and like connect.
That's kind of the thing. Like the more the population is informed of the day-to-day goings on of all this stuff, the more we're like, I don't like this, you know? And we have a voice. We're supposed to have a voice. Like that's the purpose of America, like we talked about earlier. So like the 1940s, we had a civilization where the government was able to spoon feed the American population of what was happening. You know, so like they told them exactly what was going on overseas, and they showed them little like movie reels to get them pumped up, to get them to sign up, but it was exactly what the government wanted the people to understand about what was happening. Nowadays, not possible. So it's a completely different animal. You can't control an entire society when everybody understands information right now, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, we have up to the second of information. So like you can't control an entire population like that.
But I also think they still had that extra help of like the atrocity of horrible genocide.
Right.
Protests did still come up over time. Katie, you mentioned Green Day. That was my big example, was that whole American Idiot
Fucking
album. You know, was
huge.
it was
I was waiting for that
anti-war.
one to come up.
Rage Against the Machines back again, like guerrilla radio.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, certainly was a lot of it. It wasn't like in Vietnam or like past eras of protest, but there's certainly like kind of a change in how that's happening. There was this first like this collective spike in patriotism and pro-America, but then there's this group that was like, wait a second, do we need to hurt a whole country? Is this really the right reason to do this? I mean, and again, you can agree or disagree with that, but that there were people that were like, wait a second now, what about the leadership?
No, it was approached with like, more critical thinking. You definitely hit the nail, because that wasn't, you weren't necessarily afforded that back then, though, because you didn't have 24/7 media. Like, yeah, now everyone can be their own judge, jury, and executioner on their phone. What I mean by that is you have all the information right now, right there.
Right.
No.
Yeah. And maybe like we talked about earlier, we had in the 60s and 70s where we had a lot of these leaders that were part of some kind of religious group, and they used that podium to be able to like talk to a very large portion of society. Maybe in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, you know, music was the way to be able to reach a very large portion of the population, you know? So if you had something to say, this is the avenue.
I like that we're all just kind of skirting at the edge of like what social media has done for protests. So I just kind of like want to pull it forward to like today.
Yeah.
Like protest songs they exist, right? I mean, I want to say like LGBTQ identity and protest songs are much more prevalent today, like Lady Gaga, Born This Way, the Black Lives Matter movement, and various hip hop and rap songs that are discussing the entire Black freedom struggle, like over time, but in particular in this present moment. And then like the role of social media, we got like TikTok, where you can use songs. So you're getting songs now maybe from like more independent artists that are like, hey, ring, this is what I've got to say about this. And then there's some songs that aren't necessarily like hitting the number one on the Billboard charts, but they are viral, and they are just
artists that did that. You're looking at one of them. That was a TikTok artist.
Yeah.
That's where they started. And their whole thing is holding up a mirror to gun violence and stuff like that, as being like, look at what you don't want to look at. Blake and I had a good 20-minute argument over whether or not to include Kim Dracula, and he said no, and I said I disagree. He said Kim's not protest music, and I said, it's funny, I don't get that when I read Kim's music. I think it's a total protest about like specifically violence and stuff like that. So maybe honorable mention
Okay.
would
yeah.
be a
We'll put
better
that on the list.
option.
Okay.
But that's not the one that I picked, just
Okay.
so you know. Just so you know. It encompasses everything from the war on terror specifically to war, how terrible it is, genocide, the Holocaust, political unrest, how bullshit war is, and stuff like that. There's a song for all of it. For religious oppression, I didn't pick a specific song. I picked a band because there's too many to pick from this band. Do you know what it is? I'm curious. You have a very knowing look in your eye. It's fucking Slayer, y'all. It's fucking Slayer. And like, joking aside, you want to talk about a band that is nothing but protest. It is fucking Slayer. Slayer has helped people through so many tough times. I even saw a interview recently with Tommy Araya who said, you know, my daughter recently approached me and told me that Slayer helped her through some really tough times. He goes, that's as personal as that's ever gotten for me. Because, you know, he's always had fans come up and say, you don't get it, but your music helped me through a really shit time. And he's like, oh, that's fucking rad. You know, I'm fucking the Chilean Santa Claus, because he fucking is. But Slayer is just the protest of it all, of religion, of government oppression, the war, and how bullshit it is, and how just because your opinions don't align with these people's opinions, you think you can go and tell them what to do. And like,
it's kind of like that don't look away, you know, sort of thing. Like, we're going to show this to you, and
it's
you need to see this.
And deserve to like experience and understand it.
Protest is really interesting in terms of protest songs, I should say, protest music. I feel like
there's a power in it.
Yeah, there's so much of it now in various genres. Sometimes just the songs, even in their simplicity, have lyrics that are powerful in what they're protesting. There's a lot of them. You mentioned Colin Kaepernick's protest in the NFL in earlier years, and I think what's really interesting, just I was thinking, because Kendrick Lamar is like To Pimp a Butterfly. That album is like definitely a lot of protest on there. All Right being like the main song that is like the unofficial anthem, I think, during Black Lives Matter movement. And he's going to be doing the Super Bowl show this Sunday. I'm actually like really curious to see
That's right.
what
I
he
forgot
does.
about that.
Yeah.
I know of Kendrick Lamar. This is like the whitest Midwestern mom you're gonna hear. Like and it's funny because I was like being a trainer way back when like, was it Damn, that album that came out? And like some of the kids were like playing. I was like, oh, this is good. Kendrick Lamar. Oh, he's the hot new thing on the scene kind of thing. But I've listened to more of his music, and he's also had that big beef with Drake when she just put Drake through the shredder. But
Thankfully.
Just shredded him right up. But
Deserved.
I was like, that would be really interesting what his show's going to look like. Beyonce in years earlier, like the song Formation, she like did like a special like little release just before the Super Bowl, but her Super Bowl show was like this Black Panther-esque. That took off, and that song went huge. And also, like, while I'm on Beyonce with the Grammys, like she won Best Country Album, which was very very interesting, very cool for Cowboy Carter, which I think is it's really kind of a protest in of itself, because like country music has frequently been thought of as like white music, but has Black roots, as all music does. You know,
that's
so
Lil Nas.
So
Completely
so like that was like a really cool, like when we're talking about like
wrong
taking back.
He's black and gay.
Yeah. Like when we're talking about like the retaking of words and songs and music, I was like, that was a very very cool.
It's a good shout,
good win there. So yeah, congrats, Beyonce. Yeah, so I think protest looks very interesting. Like we're in it right now. We've said it so many times over that this country has been. It's literally written in the code of America, written in the Declaration of Independence about like this is a foundation that's been built on protest and speaking up for what we feel is right. Like, right, that's the American thing, right? We should speak up for what's right. Protest. If we're not happy with what the government's doing, the people, like the government is in place because of the consent of the governed, you know, and so protest music has had a really interesting and really cool, like when you overlay it with the history of America, a very interesting woven fabric together. And I'm just I've really loved being able to talk about all of this with you both, and
It's very relevant.
been such a pleasure. I really love this, so thank you for joining me on this musical adventure. It's been so good.
Well, thank you for having me.
You got stuck with me genetically, but I'm happy to be here.
I love it.
Yeah.
I've been listening and watching since the first episode, actually. And
like 3 or 4
years. Really
years.
Nice to be able to be a part of it.
It's about damn time.
I was gonna say, I'm glad you finally got here.
Yeah. And we want to have you back on to talk comics. We've got some comic stories or like pop culture stuff that we want to do, or just if there's anything that you're like, I've got to fucking talk about this history. I'd be like, yes, Matt, you come back here, get back in the smoke circle. We've loved having you, and we've loved having all of you. I know this is a big episode, but there's a lot to talk about, and it's really important. So we hope that you enjoyed all the facets of American protest music. Again, we just kind of skipped that rock across the surface. So we know that there's songs that we missed and maybe certain eras that we could have talked about a little bit more or differently. So please, in the comments, if you're watching it on YouTube, go down in the comments. What songs did we miss that we should have added, or eras, or whatever? What are your comments? What do you got to say about it? And also you can do that on Spotify as well too. You can leave comments on there as well. Oh man, we've had a great time. A lot of great discussion to kick off season 5. I'm really thrilled to be back and be doing it all for another season. And we're gonna have a lot of guests on in this season. We're gonna talk about a lot of different things.
Season 5.
And they're gonna bounce out season of the guest, season 0. A lot of guests I'm trying to wrangle, a lot of various different kinds of topics that we have, and we've got a few fun different things up our sleeves. So thank you once again, Matt, for being here with us. It was a fucking pleasure and a half. Thank you so much.
So nice.
Matty Breeze, our bestest best friend. So we'll be back again in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, folks, get money, get high, give love, and
yes, protest when and where necessary, but also for me, super important, before you head out on your boat of idealism, which there's nothing wrong with, learn your history first. Like, read. Those who do not first learn history are doomed to repeat it. So what I'm saying is yes, obviously, I think you should listen to this fucking podcast. I think we have good things to say, but we're not the only ones doing this.
Right.
There is so much history out there that is at your fingertips because you are alive at a time when you can type something into a phone and you can find it. And do not underutilize that resource. Please, please. Just have a look. Learn your history. Learn it, definitely. Then you can get in your little boat of idealism and paddle your way upstream like the little salmon that you are. But definitely, that's what I'm going to tell you.
Beautiful.
And with love, people.
With love. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.